streets are marsh. Backroom deals swept into the dark. The fattest wallets swing the heaviest bribes. Lining senators' jackets with reason to lie. The macho stands of proletariat tones. Democrats hide their hidden thrones. Oligarchs swing their skeleton keys while the innocent starve in the land of the free. Whoa, 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 whoa. Buffets shown by broad country built on life. Fathers died for liberty, but for the price of oligarchy. Buffets shown by broad countries built on life. Our fathers died for liberty, but for the price of oligarchy. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're not in control. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're not in control. Deadly turn the middle class on the pole. Lucky sends the strongest sons off the war. Hollywood balls bleach onto our eyes. Subdue the masses with terrorist guys. Score all you want, you gotta play to play. In this twisted game, voting then you break. Resources are prey, turn the whole world great. The common tragedy destroys the commons today. Whoa, 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 whoa. Puppets shown by bright new countries built on life. Our fathers died for liberty, but for the price of oligarchy. Puppets shown by bright new countries built on life. Our fathers died for liberty, but for the price of oligarchy. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're not in control. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're not in control. They own the system, no compromise. 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 We're born out of hungry, the dreams were in our ears, and we pledged to for promises year after year. But now we're angry and the Congress should fear. I'm not in control, but my goals are my fear. They fired their engines to platinum guns, but millions of arrows can blot out the sun. They fired their engines to platinum guns, millions of arrows can blot out the sun. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're not in control. Whoa, 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 whoa. We're not in control. Whoa, get back in line. tofu. That food feels fuzzy, 'cause it's made from stuff that's scuzzy. I always thought I was such a nerd. I refused to eat that strange bean curd. I wouldn't eat it, oh, but it ate you. Killer tofu. Killer tofu. I eat my sugar cereal, but it makes my teeth bacterial. It's swimming kinda cruddy. Just stick right to your buddy. I don't need too much fried food. Killer tofu. Killer tofu.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, we did some things that were wrong. We did a whole lot of things that were right.
We've taken control of the oil in the Middle East, the oil that we're talking about.
Talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create.
We choose truth over facts.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. The foothills of the Himalayas.
Television. See what people are saying.
We are fighting Satan himself.
Journalists, ask them the question! Ask them! Ask them! Ask them!
Agreed that everybody wants to stay inside this. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry. America's dead.
America is indeed dead.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in again to another fun-filled week of Politically Homeless.
Yeah, 2 weeks off of Vina News felt pretty empty.
What's that?
It felt pretty empty this week with a lot of people not doing anything. Besides today.
Yeah. I definitely feel that, and like I was telling you earlier, it's like if you don't know where to look, I could see how you could think that there's not much going on these days. Other than the economy's doing great.
It's dynamic.
We're days away from winning the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I was like thinking about turning back into like so I'm trying to eat meat again because I'm realizing it's really for the protein, really. So it's just not doing it anymore. Like I can't eat fish that much. Like I can't eat so I'm trying to like eat meat more, but then I went to take a look at the meat prices and
lost interest.
And I'm just like, what's really the point? Like, what am I I'm spending more money for like something like I'm really like trying to force myself to do.
Wait,
so
like you're like. I mean, given our channel and kind of what we talk about, you're eligible for EBT. Why wouldn't you apply for food stamps, bro? That'd be the first thing.
I think I tried. I think I tried. I don't think I am.
Didn't you just get let go? I thought.
No. I had my hours cut. I still work there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth a shot because even in Colorado, I told them I made about $800,000 a month from DoorDash, and they still give me like $150 a month. It's not, that's like a week of groceries maybe, but a week.
No, I'm still gonna try to see if I can scam unemployment and somehow to like see if I can just
So
say like
how
I
do
got
you?
my hours cut, so like, and then secretly work this other job. But yeah,
Hey.
not a lot of people are having a great time, including Mitch McConnell. I mean, he's just been
By far, like the fact that they caught him doing it again, like
it's not just him. It's all of them. I mean, we live in octogenarian land where we live in a world.
But let's make everything about Trump. We'll freaking see McConnell can't even fucking finish a full sentence. And that's like 6 months behind Biden. Biden wasn't able to finish sentences like a year ago.
Yeah. It's not letting me share for some reason.
Do you want me to put it up? Let me see if I can grab it. That's the Daily Loud clip, right? Did they take it down? I see it. Do you want me to share it? I don't even hear anything now. Oh, let's see this. These are all like different. Wrong window. What's going on here? I don't even see it. I can't hear you. I don't know what happened. Audio. Oh, it's like that. Okay. Guess we'll have a little bit more technical difficulties week 2, of course. Let's see if I can pull this up then. Where is it? X.
I got it.
Now I can hear you.
Yeah,
Are you pulling it up?
Yeah, I swear it's not an internet issue, just an
make it full screen.
Yeah, if you're a sitting
running for re-election
politician.
That's right.
Did you hear the question, Senator? Running for re-election in 2026?
It's like the Feinstein shit. Hey, just say aye. Say aye.
This is the moment where I really think that I think Mitch McConnell's a robot. I don't think it's the real one. I think they replaced him.
So it's like the Biden clone thing. It's like every once in a while, it just looks like their wires get crossed, or like somebody said the code word, so they had to like shut the fuck up. I saw this video the other week. The last time McConnell like froze up, people were trying to say some lady like came up to him and like
it was the same exact scenario. It was the same exact thing that happened again.
Just bizarre, man. I'm not a doctor. I don't know what the fuck's going on with that dude, but I mean, other than he's just an old fart losing his freaking mind. Cannot believe this person keeps getting elected.
And 1 second. In terms of the, I wanted to share the Tucker thing as well. Or at least I wanted to ask about it because, as we know, Tucker Carlson is CIA. So we can assume.
I mean, I'd say lying is always. I'd say CIA adjacent, like Alex Jones is CIA. You know.
Yeah, like his dad is CIA. Well, that's why they get fed information before everyone else, and that's why they can like tell the truth.
Yes, and like for people who aren't aware, this is something that goes back to something I think William Casey said was that one of the ways, or no, it was Stockton, the other CIA agent. They used to say like what they would do to get their assets is they would link up with freaking journalists and stuff, and they would feed them limited hangouts and stuff. But every fifth piece of information they'd give them, or every like third piece of information they'd give them, would be completely fabricated and completely made up.
John Stockwell.
Yeah, Stockton. So,
I think it's Stockwell, but yeah,
it might be Stockton. Yeah, you know
one
the
of
video
the,
I'm talking
like-
about. But basically, what ends up happening, and this is how the CIA is able to source disinformation, is that they give out bad information to people like Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones and stuff every once in a while. Like they'll get the scoop every once in a while, but they also get dog shit every once in a while. And then the CIA will use their cutouts, whether it's like Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe, or something like that, and say, "Oh, Tucker Carlson said," and it will be disinformation that was given to TC by the CIA. So that's kind of anyway. I'm trying to get better at like explaining to people why, like, how these kind of things operate.
No, it's a complete octopus, and like it's a web of like a media.
But like it's not like a crazy thing. Like this is what the CIA does to fucking.
It's trickle down truth.
trickle down truth.
That's what it is.
Truthiness.
Trickle down truthiness. We can call it that.
Are unsustainable. Lying is always unsustainable. You're always found out in the end, whether in your lifetime or posthumously. But lies are always revealed by their nature. And these lies are so big and so obvious and so stupid that it's going to be very clear to the majority of voters before the election that the Biden administration has no idea what it's doing, that Joe Biden is not running the government, and that it's not working at all. And I think by that point, we're going to have...
The majority of people are that.
Huh?
To be honest with you, I think the majority of people understand at this point already that.
I mean, I think you really have to have the wool pulled over your eyes pretty good.
You have to be pretty deep in the woods.
Like, I'm trying to think right now.
At this point, if you're watching the CNN headline and you're seeing like Bidenomics, all the Trump court cases going on, you're lost, man. I'm sorry, you're lost.
Well, that's a real economic contraction. I think we're going to be in the teeth of a very tough recession, and that makes everything much more intense. And so if your goal is to maintain power, and if you think once you relinquish power, the problem with criminalizing politics is the people who do it imagine or know that it will be done to them. So once you start indicting your political opponents, you know that you have to win or else they're going to indict you if they win, right?
Right.
And so they can't lose. They will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. I know everyone on the right's afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandate. They're not going to do that. They can't do that. If they've already been exposed, that won't work. There's going to be no. What are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia. Is what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. And
really?
Yes, of course. They want it anyway. I don't think we'll win it, but that's a separate analysis. But I think it's a political matter. They need to declare war footing in order to assume war powers in order to win. I believe that. And I think the evidence suggests that's true. So if you're worried about our politics getting like even more vicious than it already is, and people being hurt in our politics, which is entirely possible, you should be worried about the prospect of an open war. We're already at war with Russia, of course. We're funding their enemies. So we're fighting Russia. But I mean, an open battle with Russia where we say we're at war with Russia. I think that could easily happen. I think we could Tonkin Gulf our way into it, where all of a sudden missiles land in Poland. The Russians did it. Our NATO allies been attacked. We're going to war. I could see that happening very easily.
Yeah. So, I mean, do we have anything like that in the United States where we can just sort of like a Zelensky cancel the elections because we're in the middle of a war? Has that happened before?
Not as far as I know. That's a good question, though.
If anyone in chat knows of a time in American history where we used any sort of like war clause or like war footing to like cancel the election, I don't know if that would be really historic.
They would now we're kind of getting into the territory where I guess I could see
You tell me if Tucker's a maniac. I don't know. This could be like another like big,
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We've already seen a bunch of stuff on how they're trying to bring back the COVID hysteria. So, that's kind of my initial pushback on that. And then, I completely agree. What did I say before? I do agree very strongly that if you're going to play the game of indicting a previous president, especially for fucking spurious bullshit, you better be prepared. for Trump to turn that shit on you, And like, kind of on a side note,
he kind of already is, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I mean, dude, like, I mean, look at it this way, like, fucking the judge in Georgia who's doing one of the cases against Trump is going to live stream it. And it's like, do you guys not realize that live streaming a court case for Trump is going to end up looking good for Trump? Like, he's going to be able.
I thought you couldn't show federal. Is that a federal court case?
Come on, this is we have a freaking. We have
is that a state court case or which?
It's Georgia. It's Fulton County, so it's about. I think it's about election fraud.
That's the reason why.
Which is funny to me. They're like the judge is so confident that there's no election fraud that he's like, oh, we'll live stream it, not knowing the kind of discoveries that are going to be shown to millions of people. Like, I just think it's, and the other thing that we've heard about Tucker is a huge fucking warmonger when it comes to China and Taiwan and stuff like that. So, like, the idea that there's going to be a war is inevitable. We've talked about that.
He is against this war in particular. That's
why.
Yeah, but that's why I don't necessarily. That's why, like, I'm sort of like, normally what Tucker is saying is usually ends up, becoming true. The same is with Alex Jones. I think with the Alex Jones situation, when we're talking about like masks coming back and like lockdowns and stuff, that perhaps like maybe it's like a little bit over exaggerated. So like maybe.
Well, Alex Jones uses a lot of hyperbole.
Can't really, but I don't think they. I think they're like starting to realize the pushback that they're getting from that. I don't know. Maybe Tucker's like sort of seems to be implying that here, that they like can't push the masks and the mandates in order to like roll over to the next.
I definitely, yeah. I mean, I saw some articles that they tried to bring mask mandates back into schools, and there was such outrage that they dropped it, or that California, like different states, were trying to freaking kind of like do the weather balloon thing and see if like people would bite, and they're really not biting it again. So he could be right to that degree, but like I still know people who freaking mask and swear down that they're going to get the next.
That's what I'm saying. It's been all year. I feel like the only people who are gonna like buy into the mask stuff are the same people who have been masked all year round. Mm-hmm. And I'm in New York. I've seen it all the year round. Like
the most like deranged, unhinged people.
Even the summer of 2022, it was the same. Like it's not a lot of people, and it's becoming less. But like there's still people on the subway every single day. You can spot at least one person with a mask, usually one in your train car too, which is. It's not like a totally uncommon.
Okay, so it is a lot. I mean,
really rural areas, especially a blue state like New York. But
I think, and the other thing, I guess, to kind of go with that is that I saw something recently. I was watching T-Lab, and it's like they're talking about like 3 or 4 different variants right now. So like, I think that's part of
they're scrambling. They got to like really find something.
So bad, but I mean, like, there's just so much other stuff there.
On the fly, do you think?
I mean, we're kind of entering that territory where YouTube may or may not use some discretion in.
Okay, true. let's drop it now. Let's go on to Maui. Now, what we were told about the Maui situation, at least on Monday, was that the cause of the fires was from damaged power lines that fell down, and because of the electric company,
and no water available. They shut off the water,
and the water too. That's part of the whole. I mean, what you would call a conspiracy, but it's not really a conspiracy because that's just a reality. It's more like a reality fact. We can call that one a reality fact, and that's something that just exists like outside of like whatever you can call a theory. So like to whatever degree we can call things a conspiracy, it's pretty obvious to everyone that
the conspiracy is thinking that the water just happened to not be working the same day as a bunch of kids get sent home from school and a bunch of houses end up in flames.
Oh yeah, and there's 1,000 kids. By the way, the death count is maybe like
it's over 1,000, right? Or we're thinking it's over.
No. What's the official death count? It's like
I don't know. I think the official one was like 130, 150.
It's like 130, something like that. It's in the hundreds. There's thousands of kids missing. Thousands of kids. Over 2,000 kids. Like there's kids like so normally in this kind of situation, when someone is considered missing, that's usually dead. They usually move.
Yeah. Especially within 2 days. Like isn't 2 days
More than
like
that.
they like get abducted.
They said a lot of these parents are missing too. They have no way to find these kids.
And the thing is, like the fires were so hot that like trying to freaking like it's just gonna be like that because people turn to ash. There's no bones. There's no freaking like that was the thing. You remember seeing all the cars and stuff that were like melted, like so. Anyway, something weird with the fires were extremely fucking hot and didn't leave much left identifying. So I think a lot of the numbers are just going to end up being missing, like unofficially dead, you know.
Well, so the electric company, they're in a little bit of a lawsuit right now, by actually several lawsuits right now, but there's a bit of a dispute between the county and electric company. They're just blaming each other right now as to who started this. Who do you believe?
Where brush fires led to new evacuations near Lahaina, just a few miles from the catastrophic wildfires. This with new questions about how those earlier fires started and if anything has been done to impede the investigation. Mola Langi is on Maui with those details for us. Good morning, Mola.
Well, good morning, Robin. As investigations into the cause of the fire intensify, so do questions about the handling of potential evidence. Maui County recently claiming in a lawsuit negligence by Hawaiian Electric caused the fire, killing at least 115 people. At one location near Lahaina being investigated as a potential origin, neighbors tell us downed power lines sparked small fires as early as 6:30 a.m. the morning of the Lahaina fires. Now, this cell phone video shot by a neighbor that morning. Also telling me they saw crews cleaning up those downed lines in the aftermath of the fires, and days before federal investigators arrived to determine a cause, a probe that is ongoing.
Which we still don't know about. But then here's 2 days ago, the electric company is coming out and saying that they turned off the electrics,
including that the fire at 6:30 a.m., the morning fire, appears to have been caused by power lines that fell in high winds. That the Maui County Fire Department responded and reported it 100% contained, left the scene, and later declared it extinguished. And perhaps most importantly, at about 3 p.m., a time when all of Hawaiian Electric's power lines in West Maui had been de-energized for more than 6 hours, a second fire, the afternoon fire, began in the same area, with the cause undetermined. Jerry Singleton's law firm represents some.
So if the fire,
So what it sounds like is that the power lines went down, the fire department took care of it, and then as a safety precaution, the electrical company shut off the power until all that stuff was fixed. Is that like the story that they're giving us? Is that how I'm supposed
to? Well, so there's no real evidence that there's.
Right, but that's what we're being told. Obviously, I'm not going to believe an energy company.
This is the electric company. They're coming out. They're saying that this is that the Hawaiian government is lying, and that this was not caused by electrical fires.
I mean, dude, I just remember what happened to Paradise, and so I'm just like my first, I don't know, like I don't think it's the energy weapon thing. Like as much as I want to maybe it's appealing beachfront property to like Oprah Winfrey and Keanu Reeves, but like I don't know if I'm that cynical. And so like the energy company had no incentive to like put them underground because they're freaking cheap and they're reaping what they sow, and they don't want to have to pay billions of dollars. So that's kind of where my take is. I'm just assuming that it's the energy company until further notice. That's kind of where I'm at on it.
I mean, it's more of like a back and forth cuisine.
The thing is the stuff with the water being shut off is fucking weird to me too. Like that's freaking weird to me. and like the turning people around. I don't know, man. It's just like it's hard to say.
Here's another question I have.
A week after the fires, the company's CEO told Tom this.
Why didn't you shut off the power when the wind started to pick up?
As I said earlier, it's still in the early days. We're still looking at all the information, and we haven't.
Yeah, we're still
actually
making
had a
our
chance.
stories.
We're still looking for it.
We're still putting all our stories together to come up with the excuse.
We're still trying to make it up as we
yeah,
go.
we're still gaslighting you guys.
That's
We
why I'm
haven't
asking.
totally
Like, is
figured
it
out.
do they just like is this planned or are they just making it up as they go along?
Well, and so that's why I think it's just like I was saying last week, where we saw a string of factories getting set on fire. And then like a few years ago, there was the Paradise Fire that was related to PG&E. So like I'm more inclined to think that it's the energy company, and now the energy company is being allowed to cover their ass. The fucking mayor, the fucking governor should be like, you guys have to answer to us within like immediately. Like, why are you guys dragging your feet? And should be having a full-blown investigation into the energy company right now, and is letting the energy company create a narrative. So I'm going to be cynical as far as that's concerned, but like, I don't know. That's just the stuff with the water and turning people around. That's where it like starts to not make sense to me.
That's
But,
the real
like,
conspiracy. That's the real.
That's the weird stuff to me. But as far as like starting the fire, like I'm not. It's weird how hot it got. I don't know why. There's some things that I'm not like familiar with enough to know about, but yeah, there we go. Go start saying Hawaiian Electric is 10% owned by BlackRock. BlackRock owns 10% of everything. Not hearing any sound. Oh, is it buffering the sound?
It's weird. Hold on.
But it just seems to me that they're being allowed to cover their asses until they come up with a story that everybody can get behind.
We haven't actually had a chance to do all of that at this time.
With all due respect, it's been 6 days, though, so almost 6 days.
And we've been putting everything we've got to helping our communities right now and our employees who are going through a lot.
It's East Palestine all over again, man. It's the same fucking story. It's like, you know, my segment coming up is like kind of deep, but like, man, it's like related to this fucking shit, because it's just companies are going to do the least amount that they're going to do to fit within regulations. That's why I just default to thinking that the energy company fucked up and they're just covering their ass. You're breaking. I don't hear you again. Your mic keeps cutting out.
Oh shit! Like so, like,
there we go.
But like, you're the electric company. Like, we're assuming that like, you're in control of all these dashboards and metrics and understanding where all like you're operating all these power lines, and you can't. It takes you more than a week to come up with
a story
whether or not it was shut off during this time period. You can't come up. You can't.
No, I mean, like, if you were,
why does it take days?
If you were guilty as fuck and knew you were guilty as fuck 6 days ago, what would you be doing? You'd be fucking.
You'd be covering.
You'd be burning the evidence. You'd be freaking like, yeah. You would be doing everything you can, calling all the higher ups and being like, "We need to get our story straight." And like, if you want to go down like the kind of conspiratorial hole, like, how do we tie in the water getting shut off and the fire, the police department turning people around, and you know, there's just elements there that make it think like it's not just the electric company. So, you know, from what I know right now, all I see is that instead of the government like holding the electric company liable until further notice and being like, you guys are on blast, we want everything, you got access to everything immediately, we're going through your shit, we're going through your cameras, we're going through all your shit, and like that's the way it's going to be. But no, instead the governor and the state is letting the electric company have their say and have press conferences. It makes me think that the government has some culpability in this, you know?
Oh yeah.
So it's like there's a little bit of a
there is nothing more fishier going on. Like what kind of like have you ever heard of a natural disaster where you weren't able to go on the crime scene? Like did this happen during like Katrina or anything? Really?
Where they weren't. Oh yeah, because they're not allowed. They're not even allowing people to freaking.
But why? Why? I really can't. Why? What? Is there a law that
there shouldn't be? I mean, there's still
I just have
homes
questions.
there. Like
person
so
with questions. That's all.
Here's the thing: is that like what's the excuse that they're giving people that they're not allowed to go into Lahaina?
That it's a danger zone. It's that like when I played that John Pelzer video, it was just him saying about reverence. Apparently.
About reverence, so just giving reverence to the people who burn to fucking ash.
Yeah, like I want to see where my fucking son is, but like can't go there because you gotta respect the fan.
That's crazy because that sounds to me like they're just covering shit up, man. It just sounds like they're covering shit up. Well, like, cause like that's what it's like. It goes back to what I was saying. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like the first day you were seeing the videos of like cars melted and bikes melted and like all this like crazy shit. Clearly fires that were getting thousands, like extremely fucking hot. You know, people. That's why I'm saying like all the like missing persons are gonna stay missing because they're not gonna be able to identify all the thousands of kids that got burned to ash. You know, so like, what the fuck happened? It's not normal for freaking. That's the thing. Like, is an electrical fire capable of fucking like melting cars to the ground? That sounds like
entire village to the ground. Can it do? I don't know. Is it normal for them to build a giant fence around the entire ground zero?
This is where they were hurting people in. This is where they hurted people. This is where they started the death streak murder. This was all a trap right here.
You guys don't want us to see what's in there, huh? How long?
This island.
Jimmy, this fence wasn't here. That's when they built it. They built it instead of looking for
like immediately put that shit up.
Okay, so when we come
Bro,
up on
that's
this
turning
hill,
into a FEMA camp. It's turning into a FEMA camp.
Is that what it is?
Remember you showed me last week?
There's cops there guarding it.
Bro, you showed me last week the storage units what they're going to put people into. It's the fucking FEMA camps AJ was talking about 10 years ago.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay. So part of and I agree it's like part of like just them covering stuff up at this point. Like obviously, so my thought process is you see fences like that. They're not just like chain link fences where they don't want people going in. They're blocked off fences. They don't want people seeing what's going on in there. And you showed the video last week of the storage units that people are being moved into, right? Like, and I think you might have had some more stuff on that, but you know, it looks like that they're going to convert it into some sort of martial law FEMA camp. So, and like Alex Jones years ago,
what else
you know,
are they gonna do?
like 10 years ago, Alex Jones was talking about how like it's that there was going to be a wave of freaking like crises or natural disasters and stuff, and then the FEMA was going to come in and we'd be under martial law. That was like one of Alex Jones's things. That's like after this happened, they started like saying nobody could watch this shit. I'm like, oh, it's a fin. You see the fucking storage units, like. Except it was weird. You saw that lady with FEMA being like, "Oh yeah, all you guys are getting is that $700 and that's it." But like, who are the people who are setting up those fences around Lahaina? Who are the people who are allowed in there? You know, what are they doing in there? Are they just going to freaking completely like excavate and bulldoze the entire area and then be like, "Oh, you can come back now"?
That seems like what they're trying to do.
That seems like what it is, right? They're just going to freaking take out the entire area and be like, yeah, like, this is your new home.
There seems to be a huge emphasis on ensuring that the media and anyone else can't see what's going on here in Lahaina, West Maui. There are miles and miles of this black fence going up that was not here before, that is obscuring ground zero and making sure no one can see what's going on inside of there from the road. No one can get in there. No one can take any pictures. And then I've also seen these weird foreign police cars showing up, these special police, I'm not sure what to call them. This is a Nissan, but there's quite a large presence of these standing guard around the perimeter. We've also lost our ability to fly drones really anywhere near this area. Now, this 20-second clip here that I tried to get out of my car and show what was...
Why can't you fly a drone? Why wouldn't you be able to fly a drone?
They probably have it so far out. Like, you know, drones only have a battery life for about like 20, 30 minutes. So, and that's like a...
No, they banned it. I'll show it later. You can't fly on.
Oh, so you, like, it's not even that they made it hard. It's like you literally will get fined if you fucking try and fly a drone.
Yeah. It's not that it's not possible. They're literally...
Here, Alexa, for Ribbon News, still in Maui, and here is my update. I'm currently in Lahaina, and by the way, behind me, this is the one of example of the multiple power lines that have collapsed. Now we have some workers who try to work on it, and now this block that road to get access to the town. And I was trying to engage conversation with the military officer to just...
you can't fly a drone unless you have special authorization from the government.
About the development on the ground, it seems that most of the military are not really aware about what is going on because nobody is giving them the information. Everything is kept between the main people in charge. So if you want to get close to the
is there a military presence in Maui?
Police headquarters,
yeah, the National
you need
Guard
to be on a special list. If you want to go inside of the town, you need a special authorization for you to go in.
Yeah, so it's straight up martial law,
if you want to fly a drone, you need to have a special code authorization to do it. So it's really hard to report here because it seems that every information is kept far away from the public. So what I learned so far from military officer, it's like he told me that by rumor that he heard from other people who work closely, it seems that most of the area have been searched so far. They don't know how much people die so far. They don't know the death toll, but they expect to be way, way more than what we heard so far from mainstream media. And we will continue to investigate, but as I say, it's really difficult because it seems that every information is kept out of the public, and it's really hard to reach the media department or anybody involved with the information. So please, if you want to follow us, go to thetruthaboutmaui.com. Thanks in advance and share it.
So the National
Guard
Guard
near this area. Now, this 20-second clip here that I tried to get out of my car and show what was going on, I was almost immediately, after these 20 seconds, National Guard came, chased me off, yelled at me, told me to get back in my car and keep moving. So you cannot pull over. You can't even stop your car anywhere near any of this.
Oh, okay, so this is interesting.
Now, I'm going to show you a...
It's a cover-up.
Well, okay, so is it de facto martial law or is it martial law? Has anybody...
No, it's not martial law yet.
So it's just nobody's pushed the envelope yet and been like, you're not allowed to let me not go to my home. Like, I'm waiting. I'm like, where are the videos of people who are like, you can't stop me from doing this? Like, I want to know where the, like, what the actual legal authority they are using right now to do that, because you can't just tell somebody they can't go to their house that they own their property on. You can't.
I don't know what it's going to take for like a full scale revolt on, because this is like a pure tragic, like, even if it's not like the government not like purposely destroying it, whatever you mean, it's just the negligence alone is just so purely evil.
Doesn't feel like negligence anymore with that fence going up, man. It doesn't.
It definitely doesn't. Listen to these people.
And we're just asking, why is our town burnt down? Why are our families' houses gone? And if you can explain that to us in a logical, reasonable way, we'll accept it. But right now, there is no explanation.
Well, that's why they're taking
right?
so
All
long
I
to
see in the
freaking get back
newspaper
to you
is
guys.
two sides arguing from what I saw in Civil Rights or whatever that magazine is, newspaper, Civil Beat. And then the other side was a Guardian putting out stuff. But then I'm hearing stuff on the other side. And I'm like, hey, somebody's spinning this story. People are using this for their advantage politically. And it shouldn't be done.
That's right.
It shouldn't be done at all.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying. Whether they are doing this, they should not be doing this for political use, either on pro-Kanaka side or the other side. We just got to get this thing, and it should be transparency in this. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have 3 items that I'm testifying on.
This
My name
guy's
is
really
Justin
good, too.
Huey. I am a teacher, a 3rd grade teacher from the burned down King Kamehameha III Elementary in Lahaina. And I am testifying on my concerns of the governor's emergency proclamation that happened 3 weeks prior to the fire, and how it suspended 7 state statutes, of which exonerated everything that you guys are in charge of, covers county organization administration. Chapter
What?
46, collective bargaining was rescinded. School impact fees, collective bargaining was rescinded. And to my knowledge, this was the first emergency proclamation in the country that didn't have a preceding incident. Normally it's like a hurricane, boom,
Yeah,
emergency
okay.
proclamation.
That's fucking
But this was
crazy.
just, from my knowledge, was
Good
just
find,
to
man.
streamline development on Maui, and it is allocated all decision-making power to one person, the housing officer of the governor, Nani Medeiros, who's unelected, who can trump every single thing that you do and everything that you say and every item that we cover, without any input from the community, without any public discourse, without sunshine law. Before I go to my, tomorrow, I love what you said, Lahaina's not for sale, please include us. But I don't see that happening. And I was able to meet with Nani Medeiros. I graciously invited her into my home in order to speak with teachers from the burned down King Kamehameha III Elementary and their own homes. And they're moving forward they're meeting with developers, private landowners, and not a lot of community unless you know how to maneuver correctly. So before I go to my next item, I would just like to ask each council member to let me know, are you in favor of this emergency proclamation that takes away sunshine law, collective bargaining, all your power in decision making? I would like to continue kindness, and before I go on to the next item that I want to testify on, who's in favor of that? Because I have serious concerns.
Mr. Huey.
It's insane.
So the government like gave itself immunity from all this shit a few weeks before it happened. That's
the intention, and there seems to be that, like, controlling opposition within the Miami Council.
So again, like, okay, so now it's like, okay, if this was a setup,
look at this, what the woman says. Not even the own citizens by it.
Why wouldn't they have had
that West Maui has had with people in charge that this is going to happen? This is the result of a decades and generations long conversation that West Maui has had with people in charge that this is going to happen, between Miko and the power lines and the fire response and the water department not communicating to people that there is a problem with their water properly, between the sirens not going off. People are pissed, and it's justifiable. And in the face of all of that, these resilience hubs, whatever you want to call them, these Ohana hubs have been established quickly because of the relationships, of the ties in West Maui and outside of West Maui that are beyond government and agencies. And the feeling, the palpable feeling in the couple of days after this disaster that we are on our own. Nobody is coming to save us. We've been asking for help for decades and nobody's coming to save us. And so
it's really, this is God bless mutual aid for what we have. I mean, and this is the only thing that we have left in this country. People have to start realizing now, like as soon as a Maui or an East Palestine happens to your town, no one's coming to save you.
Well, here's kind of like it's kind of like what happened. I know this might sound like weird, but it's kind of like what happened with Bernie. Bernie was going to lead us to like the promised land. I thought he was going to be this great guy, and then when he turned out to fail and be this just simp for the Democratic Party, I realized there was nobody. So like people who are going through these tragedies and are seeing that the government is giving hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine, knocking anything to them, they're getting like a lesson in freaking dual power, creating freaking organization outside of outside of our institutions, like communities. Like there's kind of an irony where people are being compelled to learn kind of in essence some sort of kind of anarchist and communist theory and like organizing because they literally see that the state isn't doing anything for them, so they have to do it on their own. And people are eventually going to get through their heads that there's kind of like a point where they go from waiting for the government to help them to be like, oh my God, we can actually do this stuff without the government. And so like we keep seeing that happen. Like what happens if that happens in East Palestine, where they're like, we're just going to have to figure out how to like manage this crisis on our own because the government's never going to help us. You start seeing all these like these unincorporated places, So it's terrible, but on the one hand, I think people are learning a lot about how their relationship to the government, And
this is the result of sitting on neoliberalism for
years. This is just fucking.
This is just at the. I mean, there's a lot of people in the space who've sort of gotten it at this point, and like kind of just like flashing the warning signals. And as soon as this shit like this happens, like this is like the result of a complete and total collapse, and people are just not aware of what that looks like.
I'll get more into it, but yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Is that basically our country is so much more interested in pursuing like the growth and development of poor countries because they can extract more wealth from poor countries. Poor countries. I use like Parenti's kind of definition of poor countries. And so it's at the detriment of Americans. We suffer because the capitalists would rather develop other countries to exploit them for more money, So that's why I'm kind of back on like going back and forth between like how much of it is a conspiracy, how much of it is just like
a lot of it is
corporate bodies completely fucking up.
I mean, a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot of.
It'll be really.
You've heard of Agenda 21, right? With the UN.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Just so people are aware that this exists. It's a plan from 1970.
Yeah, actually,
the United Nations Habitat 1 plan that came down at the Vancouver Convention in 1976. Under this plan, all humans that once lived on farms and in rural areas, so-called wildlands, will be relocated to cities, now referred to as human settlements.
And the idea is that if you concentrate populations into specific areas or zones, less energy usage, less water usage, and less transportation. So people will have less reason to leave home. They'll stay in their homes. They may even work out of their homes. And so they're not going to be using their cars. They're not going to be using energy. And they're not going to be using water.
Since, as we saw earlier, the UN is not big on property rights, it should come as no surprise that the first private property to be phased out will be single-family homes, what socialists at UN headquarters consider suburban sprawl. Instead, we the people will live in apartments and condos in megacities near railroad tracks. Our super tall dwelling units will all be built to UN-specified building codes authorized by ICLEI, COGS, the ADA, and a myriad of NGOs and other friends of sustainable development.
Yeah, that's the plan overall. Biden admin doesn't seem to be taking any more shit about this. They seem to have their day and then they want to run with it. This is Peter Ducey asking KGP.
She looks so enthusiastic to take his.
Oh yeah, we'll listen to her answer on this.
And it seems like the hurricane response so far is robust. Did you guys realize that the initial Hawaii wildfire response was not that good, or is it just?
Don't get me wrong, he's a douchebag, but like he's.
I mean, I think he's
at least he's willing to ask questions. God damn.
Easier for people to get help from the White House when the president is not on vacation.
So the premise of your question and the way you pose your question, I disagree. Just for the record,
I disagree with your question.
If you were to do your reporting
What?
and speak to the governor of Hawaii, the senators of Hawaii, the folks on the ground, they would say that the president reacted in record time when it came to dealing with the wildfires.
Yeah.
When it came to dealing and making sure that they got everything that they need on the federal level to deal with what was going on the ground. Let's not remember.
It's insulting. It's insulting how she says that. Like, it's just like, really, like, how long did it take Biden to go out there? It was like 6 days, right? 8 days.
Let's not forget, we just got a fresh new package of millions of arms to Ukraine. We got some air defense missiles in there. We got artillery rounds. We got javelin missiles, hydro rockets. What else could you ask for?
Well, it's like you were saying, like, shouldn't they be happy they got that $95 million?
Why can't people just shut up with their $700 and take it?
The critical needs assistance that was provided to those in Maui, $700 in payments to individuals there, given the cost of living in Hawaii, specifically in the Lahaina community. Is anything being done right now? Are there considerations or efforts being made to try to raise that cap, that $700 figure for those who are there?
Yeah, the $700 figure of critical needs assistance is really just that amount of funding for some of the very immediate needs.
That's it. Sorry.
That individuals have.
What do you expect
every
people
year?
to do?
The main part of our assistance, which is our individual and household program, adjusts annually based on inflation. This year, it's $41,000 of a cap that individuals can get. That will get raised after the fiscal year. I don't know what that number is yet, but we do adjust that main portion of the funding that goes to individuals annually based on inflation.
The critical needs assistance.
Yeah, so don't expect anything anytime soon. Sorry.
So what's the population of Lahaina? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't, but I can tell you that $700 nowhere in the United States is livable.
Well, right. So my thing is, like, so what are they going to do with these ostensibly tens of thousands of residents who I guess are living in hotels and shit for now, living at friends' places, like, just completely displaced? So, like, you know, you showed the storage unit thing. Like, is this what I just don't understand what's going to happen. Like, people are going to go from having nothing again, and they're just going to provide them homes. Is Lahaina about to become some freaking like test for testing?
You know, it's the testing grounds. It's a perfect testing ground. It's distant. It's not even like, it's barely, you know, a state at this point.
Keep talking. I want to know the population of Lahaina, because like
you know, I mean, at this
you're
point,
talking about tens of thousands of people that they're going to put into storage units. It just, something doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so it has a population of 9,118. Okay, so not a crazy big population, but every single one of them is displaced. Let's say on the high end, there's 2,000 people who are dead between children and adults. 2,000, between 1,000 and 2,000. So let's just say there's like 7,500 people that are displaced, right? They're living at their friends' houses. They're living in hotels. They're living in tents. They're living not in Lahaina, right? So what the fuck is going to happen to those people? All of a sudden, they're going to just like take the freaking blackout signs on the side of the road down, and they're going to be like, here's your storage unit. Like,
that seems like the plan.
What's the not conspiratorial thing? What's the
what's climate change? Shh.
What's the like? I'm just trying to understand. Like, I'm like,
you have to stop. The world is
why.
burning.
This is why I was asking. This is why I was asking before if it's
No more
like
questions.
de facto martial law or if it's real martial law. If it's like did the government in the middle of the night fucking sign martial law and people just don't really know about it? But if you try and go in Lahaina, like you'll get a gun pointed in your face. Like,
I think you're asking too many questions.
That's a fucking FEMA camp.
You're asking too many questions.
I'm just really curious.
Would you rather would you want to talk about the?
I hope somebody at Rebel News, or I hope like maybe somebody at Gray Zone's got boots on the ground over in Maui trying to scope things out. But like,
yeah, no, Jeremy's over there.
Jeremy Lafredo's over there. Okay, awesome. I hope somebody's willing to freaking push some buttons and get some answers because like.
Well, Nick Sorter's over there. Yeah, they got people over there.
I mean, Nick Sorter, like, yeah, I saw like a little bit of what he's doing, but like, I really hope somebody pushes some buttons so we get some answers because like the last thing we want is for those freaking walls to come down and you just see a bunch of storage units and it's like, oh, welcome to your new homes. Like I just have the worst dystopian picture in my head, like 2 weeks from now of like, it's going to happen like that. Like if they were planning this shit out like over a month ago where they were like just signing away their like so they were immune against freaking liability, that means that they got the shit ready to pop off. What if the power company does have a plan B where like everything's just going to be ready to go in a couple weeks? Like I don't understand. What's not the conspiracy here?
It's climate change.
What like you know, like within a few days of this stuff happening, we're hearing about this private company that's sending out storage units for freaking like jack shit to everybody. Like, come on, like it just, I don't know, man. Like
free closets.
It's not like I think it's just gonna like where's all these people? That's what I want to know. Where's all the people? 7,000, 7,500 people just like completely displaced.
But the children alone that there's thousands of children missing. People don't. The veracity of that, the official count is.
You think it's thousands of children?
It's over 2,000 children that we don't know where they are.
Christ, dude.
You want to head into or the housing crisis?
A bunch of freaking thousands of kids. Okay, so. This is the other thing is like I end up like at what point do you just think it's like a fucking satanic ritual that Oprah from the other side of Maui was fucking ready to have go and like freaking burned up thousands of children? Like people are crazy. I just like and people have tons of money. So like we'll just freaking pretend it never happened and people don't have to see like bones of their freaking children because we have so much money where we'll just have the freaking National Guard. It's blowing my mind what's happening there. And I'm glad that you chose to talk about this week because like.
Oh no, I want to keep talking about it because this is like
it needs to stay at top of mind because I think there's like something going on there.
Like, I don't watch mainstream media that much, but like I haven't really seen a lot. I saw a little bit in the beginning, but I don't remember.
Dude, all they're talking about is fucking Trump, you know, or you heard fucking Tucker Carlson or fucking not even Trump. If they're not talking about Trump, it's like, what are the GOP? I don't even know what Fox is talking about, but it's like war with China and stuff like that. They don't give a fuck about Maui, you know? So like people are just completely out of touch. So I'm glad we're staying on top of it because I'm glad like Jeremy's out there. I hope he fucking comes across shit because like, this shit's freaking
no.
crazy.
The Maui situation is like pretty much entirely on the backs of like independent media at this point.
It really is. The reported Russian warships violate Hawaii borders was actually a Maui aid ship escort. No way. So wait, hold on. Do you see that comment? So is Ghostart saying that like a Russian aid came to freaking help people of Maui? And they turned it into a bad thing. That's crazy. That'd be worth looking a little bit more into. That's crazy. So we were trying like Russia was trying to help. Yeah.
that's like
Russia sent over an aid ship to Maui, and it got reported as a Russian warship. They sent one with the freaking cross on it, ostensibly going by Ghost Star. Like I'll look more into that, but it sounds like something that the state would absolutely turn into some fucking Russian fear thing.
That's insane. That's insane.
You know? So like Russia went over to freaking Maui with the freaking white flag, and it got reported as a warship. I don't quote me on that, but like that's what I'm seeing here, so I'm kind of more curious about that. But that's fucking wild. That means that like the Democratic establishment just has no bottom to their depravity. They won't even give Russia the like least bit of credit.
Do you want to head into
let's see. We've been going about an hour. We can go. Oh, because okay. Well, we can go into imperialism. We can go straight to that. That works. So, it's actually a good transition because,
this is more of an extension to like the BRICS conversation.
Yeah. So it's mainly about BRICS. So as a lot of you guys probably know, it's like the BRICS summit ended a few days ago, and so a lot of you guys might be familiar with Ben Norton, but he has a channel with geopolitical economy where he has on Michael Hudson and Radhika Desai, and they literally were talking about like imperialism 101 for about an hour, and we're talking about BRICS and kind of trying to give us a little bit more perspective on how to understand it, because a lot of people just kind of look at BRICS in kind of like a one-dimensional way and look at it as a threat insofar as we're told to believe that China is going to like try and take over the world or stuff like that. So let me pull up my notes really quick because there's like a couple points I want to say before we start this. But basically, it's really easy to kind of, as we're not really informed about what's going on with BRICS and how imperialism is described, it's really easy to kind of get into a kind of propaganda thing where we just believe that China is trying to take over the world. And I actually, to a degree, used to look at BRICS before today as potential for China through the use of yuan, because they're a country of like 1.6 billion people, the only country bigger than them, or same size as India, and India doesn't have the GDP that China has. So like I was concerned that it's like, oh, they're abandoning the US dollar for Chinese currency. Oh, so it's like they're just trading, with like a little bit more nuance to that. But anyway, the big thing is that they prioritized getting rid of the US dollar, which in a way put my mind at ease that it's not just China trying to have its own hegemony, but that they're just trying to get rid of dollarization. They're trying to de-dollarize, which is really fucking bad for the United States. I mean, needs to happen, but it's really fucking bad for us. And
it's like sanctioning the U.S. almost.
It kind of is like sanctioning.
It's like a hyper sanction of the U.S.
But what's going to replace that eventually, and what actually, the World Bank was one of the ideas for the World Bank way back in the day, was to establish a currency that could only be used for export and import between countries. Okay, it wouldn't be used between people; it'd be used between countries, and it was called Bancor. And basically, the only way it could be used was towards buying goods that would go towards the development of other countries. So you couldn't buy on speculation through Bancor. So that's why it's good to establish a currency that isn't tied to a sovereign nation and instead is like based around the benefit of the entire like BRICS community, because then you don't end up with something like what the US has, which they have the petrodollar, they have IMF, but all that stuff has to be traded in US dollars, so they're able to boost the value of the US dollar kind of artificially without much of our input. So anyway, that being said, Radhika Desai and Michael Hudson are two of my favorite economists, and Michael
Hudson's really, I don't know much about Radhika, but
I mean, I'm learning more about Radhika, but they're both Marxist economists. So you're going to freaking like, I don't know, like
you're getting the
there might be some people who are libertarians or right wingers, whatever, like at the end of the day, you can appreciate Marx for what he wrote as far as understanding capitalism, because that's not taught in schools. That's not taught to anybody. Even Michael Hudson talks about while he was going through like his education that they didn't teach him about imperialism because the neoclassical economists who were teaching him back in the 70s thought it was stupid. Okay, so it just shows you how out of touch economists are and how low the bar is to kind of like understanding some of the core stuff of how our system works. That being said, they talk about Marx quite a bit. All I want you guys to look at it is not from like, oh, they're communists. It's like, no, Marx had a really good critique on how to understand capitalism. And I think now is the time, and I guess I'll save like the housing market stuff for another day. But now is the time, especially with BRICS, for us to start to understand how our system works instead of just making it this red versus blue thing, trying to kind of get a better, broader perspective of how it works. And I think these guys do. They brought out this episode yesterday, and I recommend watching all of it and really their whole channel. But I'm just going to talk about a few points and try and break them down a little bit more, some of the key points that they bring up in terms of BRICS and in terms of imperialism, because I think if you ask 10 people what they think imperialism is, you're going to get 10 different answers. And so with them bringing up this episode, really kind of talking about imperialism, they bring up about 10 points or so that we can kind of go over, and it will give you a really good foundation, whether you're just like talking to somebody like you saw at the cafe, or you're talking to somebody who thinks they know their shit. Like, really, guys, the bar is so low for understanding how our system works. Just listen to these people like 2 or 3 times, and you'll start to see our system differently.
Who are said to be reluctant to do so. But despite all the predictions about the disunity and the fracas that would ensue with China having placed the inclusion of new members on the agenda, the fact of the matter is that the BRICS meeting has closed today. The BRICS summit in Johannesburg has closed today with the inclusion of 6 new members. So that's Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Argentina. Given the large number of West Asian and North African members here, we can begin to wonder what this is going to do to US influence in what's generally called the Middle East. The BRICS countries have not only admitted these new members, but they have also agreed to set down the rules and procedures by which a large number of new members will be inducted, because, as you know, dozens of other countries have expressed an interest in the BRICS. So it's quite possible that the BRICS may well become the institutional foundation of the world majority, that as the global South and Russia are increasingly being called. They have done more things. The Western press has also sought to portray these countries, the BRICS countries, as little more than a bunch of autocracies or very iffy democracies. But in fact, despite such propaganda, what we've seen in the BRICS summit is that they have been focused on presenting a very different vision of the world order, one based on development, on people-centered development. And this has been expressed in a direct confrontation with the Western conception of the world order, which has, of course, been dressed up in the garb of human rights and democracy, but for decades has brought only poverty and exploitation to much of the world.
Well, in many ways, this was
okay, so that's
a preliminary meeting.
They can do 125. But so, just really quick, this is kind of where it kind of clicked for me, where, as I was saying earlier, like we hear one of the things you hear a lot about BRICS is that China is like, hey, we'll trade in yuan, our goods for your goods. We won't use US dollar anymore. And that was like my concern. She's like, listen, it's about having a mutually beneficial thing, and that the priority was getting rid of the US dollar. And well, Ghost Star, I'll let you listen to a little bit more of this, but like it's definitely going to pay. It's definitely going to help collapse the dollar. That's why they shit on it so much, is because it represents how I'm interpreting it as you have this block of countries, which she says later, they're not all socialist by any means, but they have some form of nationalism, and their nationalism in like kind of the broadest sense is to kind of look at it as nationalization of resources, which means like stuff like their banks, stuff like their oil gets, instead of a CEO raking in profits for themselves, that money gets reinvested back into their country. So that's kind of how I'm seeing the how BRICS stands versus the Western countries, you know, the capitalist countries, because not all BRICS countries are socialist by any means.
The problem is going to be the relationship between the BRICS and the West. How can they create a new international order that we've been discussing while they have to pay all of the neo-colonial burden of their foreign dollar debt and the foreign ownership?
Don't we owe like billions to China?
So he actually talks about that. So one of the really interesting things one of the really interesting things, since you brought it up, the U.S. has this kind of, I don't know how, I can't think of the term right now, but they basically have like declared themselves kings of the world, where like because our dollar has global U.S. reserve as a global U.S. reserve, we don't have to pay any of our debts. We literally don't have to pay our debt. We will never pay our. We will literally like that's why I want to tell you, like, our 20 trillion, 30 trillion, our debt doesn't mean anything. Like, it literally doesn't mean anything. Okay, so we can have our $30 trillion debt and just keep juicing it up, keep juicing it up, keep juicing it up. But then when we go to Argentina, or we go to freaking Chile, or we go to a country that is straddled with IMF debt, we can be like, hey, it's time for you to pay for your debt, your sovereign debt, in US dollars. They can't even pay for it in their own currency. So they have to take their own currency, devalue their own currency to buy US dollars, to artificially inflate US dollars, to pay for an IMF debt that is odious, something that's just straddling them.
No one's going to do that.
So what Hudson is talking about
crashes, and why don't they just say, like, fuck the World Bank, fuck, because they're all like,
well, play the rest of it, but there's like another minute of it.
All right,
he kind of goes into it.
Of
I know
oil
there's
and,
like so good questions.
mining rights and public utilities. How can they enforce climate cleanup costs on foreign oil and mining pollution if the current international law says that the companies have a right to sue any government for a new tax on multinational firms or new regulations, and so that means the government has to pay all of the cleanup costs, all of the external diseconomies, and essentially they're put into an even worse locked-in position today than they were in the colonial period. So how can they defend themselves from this kind of U.S.-sponsored order and the regime change for countries that try to create an alternative to it? All that's going to have to wait for the future BRICS meetings, and we really can't even begin to discuss that now.
This is a part of imperialism,
what we thought.
And this is how we go from imperialism going from where you had soldiers standing at the border, you know, colonizing, to where we're in financialization of colonization, where they make it so hard. Like, what he's basically saying is that let's say Argentina was like, we're going to nationalize our mines. They're no longer private mines. They're no longer owned by US or China or US entities or Western entities. We are taking our mines. What Michael Hudson is saying is that, okay, if you want to nationalize your mines and you want the profit generated from those mines to be reinvested back into your country instead of CEOs in another country, you have to pay fees for you to nationalize it. You have to basically pay off the CEO. You have to pay off the company for the inconvenience of losing that business. You have to go through all these hoops to decouple yourself from imperialism, from colonialism, even though you ask the average shitlib or something like, is there colonialism? They'll say no. Michael Hudson is making the argument that there's still colonialism. It's just not through fucking guns.
Yeah.
It's through freaking financialized colonialism. Okay.
No,
It's
like,
through freaking forcing
like after World War II, like, I feel like people, or at least like the world in general, sort of like got like this really like bad distaste. I mean, everyone saw the Holocaust. Everyone like it's very fairly recent too. So I feel like a lot of people grew like this like distaste for like this. Well, I mean, it's still. I'm not saying that it doesn't still happen. It obviously does, but there's like there's more of a distaste for war. It's like less cool than it used to be back in like the 1920s. So now we see like the weaponization of finance, and the U.S. like kind of like took the lead in this, but China does it as well, and that's like
China. Yeah, it's a little bit more interesting with China because one of the things that kind of happened is that like Marx recognizes that capitalism in a way, okay, like, and I don't mean this in like a positive way really, but like Marx said that capitalism was revolutionary, okay, revolutionary in the fact that we were getting away from feudalism, okay, so that's what he was meant, revolutionary in the way that because of the way that capitalism is, it eventually gets to this point where you have monopolies, okay, you end up with like the Amazons in the world, the Walmarts of the world, you end up with these very consolidated industries. And it's like, oh, that's a great time to socialize everything because thanks a lot, capitalists. You did great for us. You managed to make tons of money in the process. And in doing so, you ended up monopolizing an industry to the point where it's now beneficial to the citizens of the country to nationalize it and reap the benefits from the low cost of production for what you guys produce. Thank you for your service to our country. Like that's what was supposed to happen. And instead we got financialized capital. So it's just that's why everything's getting so miserable is because he had a vision that like after things got so miserable that we were just gonna socialize everything. Like it would make sense after there's one or two companies left that produce oil, you know, oh, there's Exxon and Shell and Citgo. There's like 3 or 4 companies, you know. Oh, time for U.S. oil.
So do all these Western international companies now.
You know, like why isn't Amazon absorbed into the USPS? Like, tell me that. Like,
so, but you can't. So, like, I don't see us like in like nationalizing any of these industries.
None of it.
These companies anytime soon. So, what happens to these companies when the de-dollarization ultimately happens? Do these companies move offshore and just completely move their operations elsewhere, operate in a different currency, and that's it, call it a done day?
So
or they collapse as well.
The nature of capitalism is that they're going to seek other countries to exploit. Okay, one of the things that Radka says later is that you have to understand that like a nation is just as likely to exploit another nation just as much as a class is to exploit another class. Okay, she quoted like that's like paraphrasing Marx, but she's like, it's like what's going to happen is the capitalist is going to be like, oh shit, Argentina joined BRICS. I'm going to go somewhere else. They're going to pack up their shit and they're going to go to another poor country and they're going to try and industrialize it until they get a clue. So we're just kind of doing this thing where we're going around in circles trying to like extend capitalism past its expiration. And like that's why I'm in the position.
Overdue.
Way overdue. So
like 1930s overdue.
She says we hit the peak of monopoly capitalism about 100 years ago, and I mean there's probably some argument there. Like I said, I think you'd argue, be hard pressed to say that Amazon or Walmart isn't a monopoly. You know, like there's, you know, most grocery stores, those are all monopolies. Like I think anybody who pretends that we don't live in a country that isn't surrounded by monopolies is kind of fooling themselves. And Marx saw as an opportunity to socialize at that point, you know, and that's where he saw where it was revolutionary.
You want to hop to 12:15? Or
yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. I just put that. Yeah, she's basically saying that, you know, some people kind of.
Yeah.
It's all right. It doesn't matter.
60s, when I was talking to liberals and to the left wing and Marxists, they opposed nationalism. They were just coming out of World War II, and they thought the lesson of World War II was if you have nationalism, you're going to have rivalries, and that they're going to go to war like Germany did, and like the Europe.
That's what I was talking about. Like, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from World War II, and a lot of people took it in different directions.
European countries did, England in World War I, and they thought the solution was going to be international. order where everybody will be one happy family. As if getting rid of nationalism would cure the rivalries. And what nobody really anticipated so clearly was that there has been an internationalism, but it's been a unipolar internationalism that is leading to war. Is the United States has basically declared war on the whole rest of the world with 800 military bases interfering at
there's the contradiction, right?
Another, and it's been
how many is it to the point? Like, I feel like the only, like, when we have like liberals that are like trying to, like, and you see it a lot, like a lot of liberals that go around and try to say that, Chinese imperialism, Russia imperialism.
And that's one of the things I'm trying to kind of debunk tonight.
You could say that there's like slaves in Africa, sure. I don't to whatever degree that like evil shit is going on that's occurring in other countries does not even compare to the level of the evil terrorist empire that the United States is. Not even close.
Not even close. And I think one of the things I'm trying to learn is like, it remains to be seen whether China is going to focus too much on self-interest, or something like Iran or something like Saudi Arabia. Like, what could they do with their sort of power and money that could kind of influence things more in their direction? That remains to be seen. That's why I'm optimistic about them having their version of Bancor, like a currency that they use to trade that is based around like the summation of values from all the countries participating in BRICS.
No,
Okay?
really, if there's any good news in this world, if there's any, it's this. It's because this marks the end. This is finally the nail in the coffin of everything that's fun.
It's going to be a long time. It's going to be a long time.
It's going to be a long time. But this is finally a response to, or at least a degree of which countries band together and understanding the United States is fucked up. They're really fucked up.
Well, Argentina's a really good example. He's kind of talking about this a little bit, but like, let's see. Well, I guess you could just keep playing what he's saying.
Almost the entire time since 1945, or at least since 1950. Maybe a few years it hasn't been at war. So the fact is that today's internationalism and globalization is a war economy, and the military spending by the United States has forced other countries to divert a lot of their economic surplus and government revenue towards military defense instead of putting in place the infrastructure that they'd been expected to do after World War II. And they've also become very dependent on trade in oil, in food, monopolized technology, computer chips, pharmaceuticals that are controlled by the United States as an economic weapon to replace the overt military colonialism of Europe with a financial and international investment colonialism.
No, you can keep playing it. That's a good play. You can keep playing it. That's good.
All that's backed by an enormous amount of military spending. So normally we would say that what's happened in the world is reflecting national self-interest, and that's what everybody expected after World War II. They thought that, well, economic self-interest is going to determine the shape of the world. But what America's neocons imagine is a policy that serves their self-interest turns out to have led to deindustrializing the United States economy, because the U.S. self-interest is to reduce its living standards, to cut back wage levels, to polarize the economy, and to define America's self-interest is to transferring as much money as possible into the wealthiest 10%. So instead of the U.S. self-interest being the self-interest of the 99% or labor, it's a self-interest of the financial class, and that has determined the international policy that led to inviting China into the World Trade Organization to essentially use inexpensive Chinese labor.
He's talking about a couple of different things here. Because you were talking about earlier about Chinese imperialism, so I guess this is a good time to talk about this. But like basically what he's saying, and this is like such a major contradiction, like, it hit me like a ton of bricks when I kind of like put this together. But basically, the capitalists, whether it's a capitalist in China, okay, we'll get to that in a second, capitalist in America, capitalist in Europe, doesn't matter, okay, they're always going to do the same thing. So hold on a second. And so their whole point, okay, is to seek labor outside of the country. Okay, it's not to seek labor within their country. I'm not talking about the petty bourgeois. I'm not talking about small business owners. I'm talking about capitalists. Okay, they're not investing in local markets. Okay, they're not investing in local labor. They're trying to get labor from other countries. So what happens? Like a United States capitalist sets up a fucking factory in Indonesia that doesn't help an American worker. It actually like makes it harder for us. So that's where this contradiction of capitalism and imperialism comes in, is that by these capitalists pursuing their own self-interest, which is consistent throughout capitalism, okay, that it ends up hurting their own local labor market.
And you see that a lot with like even recently with the blowback with Iraq. I mean, if you look with a lot of like our current and even every single modern foreign policy decision within the last 20 years, I would argue even longer than that, has been completely
71 or so
chaotic and against our own interest. Look at the Russian ruble right now. It is the exact opposite.
So he even says, he even says that. So he talks about this, the S&P 500, which is the top 500 richest companies in the United States. Okay, get this. Top 500 richest companies in the United States: Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, all the richest companies in the United States, Tesla, etc. Okay, 92% of their profit, the money they make, not all their cost, the profit that they make, 92% of it goes to stock buybacks and dividends. Okay, so they're increasing the value of their own company artificially by buying their own company. Thus they're taking back the value. There's not as much dilution, and they're giving dividends to people who invest in the stock. So they're making the people who invest in these little pieces of paper more wealthy. Okay, so only 8% of profit from private industry, which that's how our country runs, on private industry. There is no state industry really. Only 8% goes into development. So no wonder we're freaking 30 years behind China, right? Because we have no central planning. And like, whether people want to, like, I'm not even a big fan of states, guys. Like, I'm not. But there's something to be said that when you have a country that has nationalized industries like banks, for instance, okay, and oil and all these industries, they're able to control how their own country develops, and they're able to spend that profit, that labor power that they got from their freaking workers, across their entire nation in the best way they see fit, instead of profiting a few billionaires.
But you know why that is, right? It's sort of like a I mean, you see this like sort of like.
Thank you, Second Sight, by the way. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Second Sight. I appreciate it. Like, so you see this a lot with the destabilization of like really large countries. I mean, you saw this in Yugoslavia, where like you have this really big country, and this is like the plan for Russia too, and the goal is to divide into small little tiny states, because it's easier to influence or a tinier like constitute or republic, with larger money and larger spending, then which ultimately you have power over anyway, individually.
So I'm gonna make a little anecdote really quick, just because it's like I have this friend who works for a company that is relatively small, but even their size, they still do a little bit of colonialism based on their export. Okay, and like, I asked her, I was like, so how much do they pay these crop workers in Africa a day? And she's like, $10 a day.
Yeah,
$10 a day. And she's like, and that's more than what they usually get. They usually get $2 a day. They usually get $2, so we should be happy. And I'm like, yeah, it's time to do this show.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, the point isn't that it's 5 times better than $2 a day. The point is that you're an American getting paid what, 20, 30 times that person, and like, you get what I'm saying. It's like, dude, like, the point is that we're still like, the capitalists even though you know this capitalist and you know that he's like a business owner and you could be friends with him, he still thinks it's better in his best interest to go pay some factory worker $10 a day to grow some beans than to have American workers. Like, and that's what Hudson is kind of saying here. Now, given her industry, we're kind of limited. That's like a different topic. But that's kind of what Hudson is saying, is that the cheap labor is not found from the capitalist countries. It's found from the poor countries, you know, the ones that are rich in resources. And that's to our detriment, and that's just going to keep happening, you know. And he talks about the growing war machine, and this is why. That's why I feel like that anyway.
The positive interpretation of nations and nationalism.
Well, the U.S. Sponsored kind of internationalism really is finance capitalism. And nationalism tends to be industrial because you want to build up your independent, you want to be self-sufficient in food, you want to be self-sufficient in basic essentials, and you need governments to take control, basically to provide the public infrastructure, the natural monopolies, communications, and healthcare, education. You want to build up your productivity by technology, and often this requires protective tariffs and capital controls and subsidies to new capital investment, research and development.
Yeah, so we kind of already talked about this stuff earlier, but this is what I was talking about before, about just the fact that when you have so much private industry that's monopolized, like they have so much outsized control over the government, that there is no planning. There's no planning whatsoever. It's completely in the hands of the capitalists. And you know, this is like, I mean, this is what Mussolini called corporatism. I mean, I'd call it fascism, you know, call it whatever you want, but like that's what it looks like. It's when we don't have any. I'm not saying that like the state should have control over like all of our lives, but like 10 oligarchs should not be controlling our country, how our country moves it's not even moving forward, you know? Like I just think of the trains that China has, you know? We get to fucking New York, San Francisco in like 4.5 hours if we want to.
Oh my God, the public infrastructure anywhere else. India, China. Where do you want to go? It's beautiful anywhere else. We have
that's just like, it's just one example, but like the Chinese market, they own, the Chinese government owns the banks. Okay, so they're not going to issue you freaking debt that's going to put you underwater for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's just, anyway, yeah, we kind of talked about that point a little bit, but the next one's really good. The 23. Yeah.
Trade. He also pointed out the following, and this is it's a quote: "If free traders cannot understand how one nation can grow rich at the expense of another, we need not wonder these same gentlemen also refuse to understand how one class can enrich itself at the expense of another." So this is a very clear placing of class and nation together in the same frame. One classes exploit other classes and nations exploit other classes. So it reveals that Marx is very aware of the structures of imperialism, and equally, as we've talked about,
I just want to pause for a second.
Also very aware that
I just want to say, like, I was kind of like more of like a class reductionist until kind of I saw this thing and started to put it together. So like I'm learning as we go too. Like I didn't see the kind of like comparison between how like nations and class are related. So like it's interesting for me to kind of take that away as well. But you know, as you were saying, like if you're one nation taking over another nation, then like it stands to reason that like an oligarch could take advantage of a proletariat, right? Like that's what she's saying. You know, and if you don't understand that, if you don't understand how like paying somebody $10 a day is like a problem, you're not going to understand how Elon Musk is taking advantage of freaking half the country, you know?
Oh yeah, and listen to this too.
Already.
Well, Rick, if you recognize the reality of imperialism, this implies an entire different body of economic theory. And I had to begin teaching economic theory in the 1969 at the New School, and I really hadn't studied it all the way through my graduate courses because most universities found it just too silly to teach. The free trade theory assumes that everybody gains from trade. And that all trade is voluntary and it's all a choice, free market, and that if you an absence of tariffs is going to make economies more equal and more competitors, and that's just the opposite of how the world economy actually works. Because the real
like I remember, I mean, and I
this is what they're taught in school. This is what they're taught in school today.
I went to college. I took economics classes before. I did it in high school too, and I like, and then you. Like you be like once you like get a real like you grow up and get a real like an adult understanding of how the world really works, and then you're like, so what exactly is free about any of this?
Well, and that's the liberal joke, right? You have like the liberal, you have the choice to be homeless. You have the you just have to work like more jobs at the same time. I don't know. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Want to make, which is that we should that geopolitical economy permits us to understand class and national exploitation together. Just as we put class and nation together in the same frame, we also put class and national exploitation in the same frame. And this is exactly so. You have class exploitation within a country that produces a certain kind of class power within a country. So at the international plane, what geopolitical economy explains is that the attempt by some powerful countries to subjugate other countries creates the structures of imperialism. So you have to understand the two together. And both forms of exploitation.
Let's pause this for a second. This is like such a fucking huge, such a huge contradiction. Okay, she's basically saying that in order for capitalist countries to succeed, other countries have to not succeed. Period. Full stop. This is like there's like a not a zero-sum game. Like there are winners and losers. And that's like a huge contradiction that just goes over people's heads. They think anybody can be successful. There are
capitalism inherently runs on exploitation. You can't have a win. Not everyone can be a winner. But the contradiction is that there's economic systems that exist of which everyone can be a winner. They just we bomb the shit out of them, and so that they can't exist, we just blow them to smithereens.
Yeah, exactly.
Us exploitation and the exploitation of other nations produce contradictions, because capital essentially, contradictions mean that capital would like usually to have its cake and eat it too, to have something and its opposite, and it can't always have that. So within a country, class exploitation produces a resistance from the working class. It produces crises of underconsumption and overproduction. It produces crises of falling rates of profit and all these things.
Dude,
and internationally,
like it's just there are people who wrote books hundreds of years ago. Marx wrote freaking Capital 150 years ago, 170 years ago. Okay. He outlined all this shit.
Marx wasn't the first one. He wasn't
even the first one, but that's just like I'm learning this stuff. I'm trying to get familiar with this stuff. So when I say like the bar is fucking down here for fucking understanding like really basic like how our world works. Like people don't understand these concepts, and this sounds really simple to me in retrospect, but like I don't know, man.
Marx was more so like the first to like inherit like reveal all the contradictions within capitalism, like how that body system works. But communism has existed before.
It's not. I mean, yeah, we can.
we can talk about that.
I wasn't even trying to like really talk too much about communism because I think there's probably people who like aren't that left.
There's no reason to harp on that.
I just think Marx has a great analysis on capitalism. I mean, I'm an anarchist.
Oh no, I'm Mark. Consider myself Leninist Marxist.
I kind of forget the points that he was making, but yeah. So
erase.
Yeah.
No, let's drop on.
Like for example, I was listening to all the commentary on the BRICS in the mainstream press, and as I was listening, I thought, okay, so these people are comparing BRICS and the G7 and BRICS and the G20 as though there is no history of imperialism, as though the G7 is not in fact.
I think it's literally like a terrorist organization.
Yeah, but on the other side,
Russia had the African summit, and then like they were like,
But
Voss literally called the EFF like Nazis or something like that.
I do remember that.
That's how they react.
This is ironic because she's pointing out that it's like G7 is the nations of imperialist nations. You know, like BRICS isn't the bad guys in this situation. The ones that were freaking doing all the imperializing, colonizing for freaking hundreds of years are G7.
Collection of the former imperialist countries and still would be imperialist countries that are trying to control the world. So recognizing imperialism requires jettisoning all those sanitized expressions. For example, instead of talking about US imperialism, people use terms like US hegemony. The US has never achieved anything like hegemony, as I've
just keep playing. She gets to the next.
wave of globalization. That was,
right.
Yeah, you were on that part.
was a wave of imperialism, and the competitive imperialism open up the rest of the world's free trade organization. What we are in the main.
Sorry,
you're good.
I'm just gonna read.
Ceaseless wars around the world, and so on. You have terms like globalization. I find it so appalling that the term globalization became so popular, not just in the mainstream, but also among many who call themselves critical and even Marxist scholars. Why is that? Because they use terms like globalization, or rather by using terms like globalization, what we are completely forgetting is that this is an attempt to force the rest of the world to open up to the imperialism and corporate power of the West. All the free trade and free markets is not necessarily for the West. It's there to open up the rest of the world's economies, the poor countries, so that they are available as markets and investment outlets.
So this is really
equally
important. I see where she's getting at now.
Yeah. So like, just before I forget, like she's trying to push the point here that like globalists are imperialists. What their goal is what I was saying earlier. Like they run out of cheap labor in one country, they try and open up new markets. They're the globalists, right? But really what they're doing is they're just trying to find more cheap labor, more cheap places to produce. Okay, so that's the point that I wanted to drive home with that, because you see the word globalist thrown around everywhere, and like it really does just mean imperialist, capitalist, like, you know, because like as I've tried to kind of show in this video, although you should watch the whole thing, it's like there's themes that are just consistent throughout all capitalists, and they're always going to do the same thing. And when we try and do things like change the words of things, like change it from being a capitalist or an imperialist to being a globalist, we're taking away that historical context. And we want to make sure that people know that capitalists have always acted this way. They've always hunted out cheaper labor. They've always hunted out cheaper places to produce resources. Like, this is what they do. So, and that's what she's driving home, and that's what I hope that like people get out of this little part.
Importantly, as sources of cheap labor and raw materials. So words like, and for example, also the use of the term globalization also means that you have to say that from the late 20th century onwards, you got a second wave of globalization, whereas in the late 19th and early 20th century, there had been a previous wave of globalization. I mean, what are you talking about? That was not a wave of globalization. That was a wave of imperialism, and the competitive imperialism that that was in train at that time, that was occurring at that time, culminated in the First World War and eventually also the Second World War, because the Second World War occurred ultimately because at the end of the First World War, the Versailles so-called
so
Versailles
here's the thing.
settlement
Here's what she's saying.
Nothing.
Like freaking 100 years ago, the people calling them globalists today would have been the same people saying the globalists were responsible for the World War I 100 years ago. It's just imperialists. It's just freaking capitalists. That's what she's saying. It's been going on forever. There's no difference between George Soros today. There was a George Soros of 100 years ago doing the exact same shit.
It's basically the Rome equivalent.
Yeah,
like Alexander the Great, whatever imperial, whatever empire or you can think of, Ottoman. It all operates in cycles.
Mm-hmm.
But
groundwork.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
a new
And using the term globalization makes
people
people forget that there are cycles. You know, it tries to turn it into one event, and that takes away the historical significance. And if we want to like predict these things, as we're trying to do, you know, then it's important to use right terminology. And I think Marx,
I mean, we can say the United States is like sort of like a unique sort of spot in history. I mean, it has its characteristics that are unique, but we can look at places like Rome and understand that like where empires come, they also fall, and
right,
this is a result of that.
Oh, yeah, and they definitely get to that. So, I mean, that's
Imperialism
kind of where I'm
seriously
at.
involves recognizing that. It also involves recognizing that today's discourse of human rights and democracy and so on is just
This is a
the
good
dressed
point.
up,
She makes a
the
good
sort of
point here.
the old discourse of the civilizing mission and the white man's burden and so on in
Okay,
a
that's good.
new
No,
dress.
it's like I skipped it before, but like the stuff about that's a whole other topic that I'm not trying to like really get into. But the whole concept of human rights is liberal bullshit, and what's not included as human rights is more important to people than what's included in human rights. You know, stuff like housing, you know, stuff like communication, stuff
Clean
like
water,
clean
clean
water,
air.
like think about, yeah, exactly. Like so you know, she's talking a little bit more about that, and that's just kind of getting the weeds on a different subject. But the concept of human rights is a liberal creation. It's not a real thing. And when the liberals, the rich liberals, were the ones to create the concept of human rights, they were able to decide what human rights were, and they chose to exclude things like housing and food and clothing
Even in
and
our foreign
maybe like
policy,
the job rights.
we can examine through manufacturing consent. We have worthy victims and unworthy victims.
Yeah, exactly.
No one in this country gives a single shit about the Crimean Ukrainians that are ethnically Russian that are getting bombed.
The ones that voted 97% to stay in freaking Russia.
Yeah, no one cares about them. They love Ukraine except for those Ukrainians.
Yeah.
So it's just really just a pure example of that concept.
Is just a new standard of civilization being imposed. So taking imperialism seriously involves recognizing all these things.
Well, I think that what neither Marx nor even Lenin anticipated after World War I was that the most problematic international disturbance was going to be not private sector debt, but intergovernmental debt. And that's what led to the, you just mentioned the Treaty of Versailles, which really meant something radical that Europe had never experienced after any of its wars.
That's
the
probably
Napoleonic Wars and the early wars, all of the allies.
But basically the key takeaway here is that as we look at people who wrote stuff 150 years ago, it's still important to keep in mind that like they weren't aware of some of the stuff that we are experiencing today. They couldn't have predicted the absurdity of finance capital of 2023, you know, because like Marx really believed that we would have had socialism by now. He like believed we were going to have socialism 100 years ago, and the Bolshevik Revolution was like kind of like Marx's realization in a way through Lenin, right? But
I mean, does he say that specific? Does he give like a time?
I mean, that's kind of how I see it, right? Because the USSR was like kind of like the case for socialism after capitalism, after like, well, they had a monarchy, but it's kind of like the same thing. Like 1914, that was kind of when monopoly capitalism hit its peak, according to Radhika Desai. You had freaking World War I, and you had freaking, when did the USSR become the USSR?
19.
I don't know, but it sounds like that's just kind of how I see it. But you know, like Lenin tried to interpret Marx, and he did a lot of things that he thought were right. And like I haven't read enough Marx or Lenin to have like a good opinion on that, but I have some opinions, but I'll get to that stuff later. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with it anymore. I think it's just important to say that they like Marx couldn't have predicted freaking finance capital, and like we have to give the greats a little bit of credit, because even though like socialism would be fucking a great step in the right direction, we got shafted with this crap, and like there's still like I don't know who's written the authoritative like book, authoritative critique on finance capital. I don't know if that exists yet. I know Marx wrote a little bit, according to like what volume 3, I think, talks a little bit about finance capital, but nobody's really like fleshed out finance capital, I don't think. I know Michael Hudson certainly has, but like I haven't read any of his books yet. So it's just there's things changed. The capitalists decided that they needed to keep things afloat, or we were going to end up with socialism.
Well, it was really the New Deal that really set the timer back a little bit farther. I don't like the only reason I pushed back on that because like I thought like
thank you, Second Sight. So
I thought Marx or I might be thinking of Lenin more so like envisioned not exclusive to like the Russian government, but like a world evolution of socialism. That's according to dialectics.
Well, okay? So
I don't know.
Isn't that Trotsky? Wasn't Trotsky the one that wanted like the global socialist movement?
Like Trotsky, sort of like, but like through like a constant revolution.
So my idea with Lenin, my understanding of where Lenin and Marx diverged is that Lenin believed that you should have a vanguard party. Okay, you should use electoralism to get communism. Like I think they both agreed that the state withers away and you end up with no state, class like a stateless society at the end, which I think is a bad argument, by the way. But that's my understanding of where Lenin and Marx diverged, was that Lenin believed that you should use the state and you should use the government and you should be a vanguard party and use electoralism to lead towards socialism and communism, as opposed to either dual power or organizing outside the state.
And also like as a like sort of like a opposing in terms of like every country needs to appear in its own form of socialism, whatever that looks like. It's not straight up for like however how a communist economy should work.
Well, it's like who said that every country will go through. I think it was either Marx or Lenin who's fucking said that. I don't know, but it was like every country goes through their own version of socialism because every country has their labor force has their own character attached to it. So when we latch onto it, I don't know. It's like a whole other thing to get into like the Oliver Anthony thing and all the psyops things and how we get co-opted all the time. But like, that's why it's important that we kind of like understand this stuff, is so that we don't get influenced by the people who just want to make us good Republican or Democrat voters. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to like do here. Give us the tools so that when we see somebody like RFK or Vivek or somebody who occasionally says the right thing, we can see through the bullshit, you know, or Joe Rogan or whoever, still see through the bullshit and be like, wait a second, they're having a kind of reactionary, they're having an argument that's not rooted in theory, that's not rooted in, you know, understanding of this concept as well as it should be. Let's go to 45.
Because in England,
in which most sectors of the economy are dominated by one or a small number of big corporations, at that point, society will have become ready. Capitalism will become ready for socialism. It will, because it's very simple. What he's saying is that insofar as capitalism is historically progressive, insofar as capitalism, by dragging humanity through much mud and gore, and by creating a lot of misery and anarchy, nevertheless develops the forces of production, it is because of the virtues of competition. But once competition is no longer there is no reason to keep capitalism. So capitalism had already reached its monopoly phase in the early part of the 20th century. And since then, essentially, the humanity has been suffering the cost of keeping capitalism alive in a small number of countries, you see?
Well, you're absolutely right about what Marx said, that there had to be a revolution. But he said a revolution is what industrial capitalism's all about. He said industrial capitalism is revolutionary because in England and Europe, it's gotten rid of feudalism. Its strategy of industrial capitalism is to free economies from the landlord monopoly, from the landlord class, and from predatory finance. So when he said he expected capitalism to spread to the rest of the world, he meant the capitalist revolution against backwardness, the revolution against feudal monopoly, and the revolution that he thought would indeed lead to socialism.
Just to put a pin in it. like all he's saying was that like when there was feudalism, you had to freaking work the crops for free, and you'd be able to like have a place to live and be able to have, you know, a share of your production and be able to live there, right? And he's kind of saying that, well, hold on, I kind of like spaced off. Freaking smoked too much. That capitalism was like a step in the right direction from that. And that's where the revolution, that's where it being revolutionary comes from, is that it's a different mode of production that, for better or for worse, you know, they make the argument, Marx makes the argument that by leading to monopoly capitalism, the capitalists are actually doing the work for us by creating an environment that leads towards socialism, right? Because all the monopolies have done all the work for us. But that's not, again, that's not what happened, and that's kind of where we're at today. Okay, yeah, let's just go to 45. And
we just had about the finer points of Marx.
Yeah,
and the key point that people forget about Marx, even many so-called Marxists, is that Marx understood that capitalism was contradictory. This is often forgotten, and if it wasn't contradictory, then we wouldn't have to get rid of it, and we wouldn't have imperialism. But both of these things are true. The next point then is that we understand that capitalism is contradictory and crisis-prone. Michael, please go ahead.
The crisis of today's finance capitalism is not one of domestic overproduction within the production and consumption, the real economy. It's turned out to be debt deflation. And internationally, the foreign dollar debt burden has become a kind of neo-colonial leverage to impose austerity, as we've said,
so
and other
pause it really quick. So this is just kind of, I think Go Start was pushing back on this a little bit. So this is kind of what I wanted to like, they talked a little bit more about this, where the U.S. dollar is over leveraged in finance capital and by issuing debt to other countries. And what's particularly alarming to me, not in terms that I think it's necessarily a bad thing, just in terms of like the U.S. dollar, is that you have a country like Argentina, where if they actually do become a member of BRICS, they've already defaulted on IMF, I think 2 or 3 times. So it represents really like quite a significant shock in how the U.S. is able to maintain the value of the dollar.
It's a big fuck you.
It's a huge fuck you to the IMF.
Big fuck you.
So it's very, 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 very important that so much of colonialism comes from the ability to issue debt, and that not being able to issue debt is going to lead the U.S. to fucking war. It will lead us to fucking war. I think it will lead us to war.
On the non-U.S. U.S. economies. So the kind of crises and internal contradiction that the international economy is suffering now, as it's being polarized, is not basically what Marx talked about in Volume 1. Although if you read Volume 2 and 3, you can see his focus on finance. Certainly, I filled that out. So let's talk a bit about what this crisis is and the way it's taking form today. The United States government is the world's largest debtor, and it says we're the unique nation. We're the only country that does not have to pay our foreign debt. And in fact, there's no way that the government foreign debt, which means the bank reserves of the whole rest of the world that are kept in dollars, none of this can be repaid. It's just they can trade it with each other, but they're never supposed to ask to be repaid. Only the U.S. private sector and the U.S. government can ask other countries to repay their debt. That is the internal contradiction that has driven the world economy apart and is splitting it and is forcing other countries to either face permanent sort of neo-feudal dependency on the United States, or to say, well, we get to develop too.
Do I need
It's
to
not
repeat
going to
that?
be just a monopoly of the European.
Do I need to repeat that? $30 trillion debt. You see why I'm always like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. The whole world just agrees that the U.S. debt doesn't matter. And because we print our own currency, we pretend it doesn't matter, even though the Republicans, the Democrats use it as a fucking wedge issue, whether to freaking do austerity measures.
That was the entire Republican debate. It was the defense.
Yeah, dude, it's fucking
That's
bullshit.
all
It's like
Republicans care about is the fucking
complete.
That's all.
Like,
the
I'm so glad you're over like electoralism, because like you like this shit makes sense, right? Like you look at this and you're like he's saying is like they have 30 trillion in debt. Like, and then you think about it for a second. Yeah. Like if they made it up to 30 trillion, it really doesn't make sense that they're ever going to pay it back, does it? How how do you even imagine 30 trillion? Like, do you remember being a kid when our debt was 1 trillion, 2 trillion? Maybe after 9/11, it was like probably like 4 trillion, 6 trillion, you know? So like, seeing 30 trillion and then hearing Michael Hudson being like, yeah, we're like, the whole world agrees that's never going to be payback. It's kind of like, oh yeah, duh. Like, who actually thinks that a country can afford to pay $30 trillion? Who actually
we're living through like a real world situation where like you kind of have, you're dealing with like a daycare full of kids, and you're dealing like with the one intolerant, like really like bad, like throwing constant tantrums. The one that was like clearly like not.
All right, so let's get to 54. Let's get to the 5438 then, because like I think you're kind of right, but at the same time, it's also like this is just what they do. This is just what they do.
Well, I mean, but so like I mean, how else are you going to tame a crying baby that's throwing tantrums? You're
well, and that's why I think war is inevitable. That's why I think war is inevitable.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Well, let's
say first of all that any given crisis is never any one thing. It's, of course, there is a financial crisis today, but today's crisis is composed both today's crisis is composed of a financial crisis, but there is also an underlying productive crisis, a crisis of low investment, low growth, low profits, etc. Furthermore, there is a crisis of not sufficiently expanding demand, which has been with us for a long time. So, one of the ways I've tried to deal with this is that, Marx, and I've actually, in my latest book, I have the most developed form of that table. I've actually created a table, because in capitalism, there are at least two forms of crisis. One is vertical, that is, it has to do with the exploitation of the working class by the capitalist class, and the other is horizontal. It has to do with the ways in which various capitalists relate to one another, namely via competition. So both the mechanisms of competition and exploitation.
Really quick,
that's a good because you see that a lot with like even in our politics, when you live in a two-party system,
people pretend that
they work together. They do work at the end of the day. It is vertical, but they're operating in factions, sort of like the mafia, in very similar ways actually, where they're operating. They're serving the same master, but they're fighting each other, and you see this a lot. And I was actually like talking to John about this with the Tupac situation with the Crips and the Bloods. You kind of like it's
right.
We sort of like, it's easier to let people let them fight amongst each other than to and be controlling both sides than it is to. The capitalists always pick both sides. They always pick.
Well, like so, it's like the capitalist always has two priorities. Okay, how to keep cheap labor, right? Because that's where all their surplus value comes from. That's where all their profit comes from. Okay, and that's what the vertical crisis is, right? Essentially, class warfare all the time, right? Trying to keep prices low, trying to keep us working as much as possible, trying to deprive us of any autonomy. That's like their primary goal. However, within that, they might not agree with every other freaking oligarch on the planet, right? And that's like the horizontal crisis, where it's like maybe that guy also has a monopoly in his own country and he's trying to open up shop in my country. That's a horizontal crisis, right?
I guess you see that with like Saudi Arabia and stuff like okay.
That's kind of so Saudi Arabia is actually a good example because they just had the new golf association, right?
And some shit in
so there's PGA and what Live Golf, right? Those two corporations, and Saudi Arabia was bidding a bunch of American golfers like hundreds of millions of dollars to go play for Live Golf, and so that was a horizontal crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, yes, like you said earlier, vertical crises always exist because they're always trying to freaking take advantage of us. They're always trying to exploit us. But it's important to keep in mind, like you were saying, that they always try and make it about like, oh, it's just the cronies, or it's just these one particular rich people that are the problem. It's just these guys. And it's like, well, no, there's all these guys that exist that all do the same thing. You just don't like these guys. So there's different factions, but that's kind of like the important thing here. Let's see. We've talked about that one.
The last many decades, layer upon layer of financial crises.
Okay.
Well, you can see the crisis in the United States. Why cannot there be investment in the United States? The largest companies, the Standard & Poor 500, have spent.
Why can't we have nice things?
92% of their profits, of their net income, on stock buybacks and on paying out as dividends. Only 8% is to invest. They can't find anything to invest in. Apple has said, we cannot find a single penny to invest new, so we're paying more money in stock buybacks and dividends than we're actually investing. We're asset stripping. And finance capitalism is primarily extractive. It has loaded the economy down with debt so much by debt-financed housing, by making its labor have to earn a high enough wage to pay its housing debt, its education debt, its automobile debt, its
side
credit
note
card
that
debt.
doesn't really go into here is that this is why we have 2% inflation every year, but it's actually closer to 4%, is because we issue more debt than we have cash.
And we're gonna have to keep on doing this every. Do you know how many we're gonna go through so many different bank crises.
I had stuff to talk about the housing crisis tonight, guys. You guys aren't ready.
No, but we're gonna have to keep financing these capitalists by printing the money and funding them every single. That's essentially what we're doing.
This is the first year. This is the first year where our just to service the national debt, okay, is almost the same amount as the defense budget. In like July, it was like 600 billion just to service the debt. That means of all the debt, the national debt in the country, that 30 trillion just for us to fucking not default on our debt. The U.S. American taxpayer has to fucking just make that money disappear. Almost $1 trillion just disappears every year into freaking capitalist hands just because we're servicing a debt. Now, can you imagine what would happen if we just nationalized the banks and we didn't have to service debt anymore? Like, where's that $600 billion going? Where's that $1 trillion bill going, to service a debt? It's just going into somebody's hands. Somebody's going into somebody's pocket. Fucking bullshit.
They're gonna need it. They're gonna need it in the next couple of years. Let's run it to 102.
Okay. That's probably good. Yeah.
Imperialism essentially is declining the way I look at it because, think about it this way. The high point of imperialism, since which point it has been declining gradually, too slowly for me, but nevertheless declining, is 1914. 1914 was the high point of imperialism. In the previous decades, not only had Britain acquired its big empire, but a number of other countries appeared that they'd also tried to acquire empires. And so the world was essentially divided up into these big empires. So that was the high point of imperialism, but it was also the moment at which the big crisis of the imperialist world order broke. The wars between the imperial powers substantially weakened them, and then that combined with the rise of communism and the struggles for decolonization in third world countries essentially put the world onto the long and slow road of the decline of imperialism and so on. But that moment also coincided with, I would say, the peak of capitalism, according to Marx anyway, because really, by this point in time, capitalism in its homelands had already entered the monopoly phase. At that point, capitalism really didn't have that much more to give to the rest of the world, to the world in general. That is to say, it had done what it could in terms of developing the forces of production. And now the point was that they would be better developed if we had other forms of production, socialists, whatever, some or the other version of socialism. So, and this was, by the way, witnessed when you
important point right here to drive home, because a lot of people think that socialism is just when you get stuff, and that's not what socialism is, and that's not what she's describing here. Okay, when I said earlier, all socialism is or nationalism is really like owning the resources instead of like private capital owning the resources. The state owns resources, like whether it's the bank, whether it's the trains, whether it's Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. It's the state that owns it, so they can reinvest in stuff like trains. And she's saying, what is to be gained by a country that is run by a bunch of monopolies, like private monopolies? What is to be gained by that? What can we possibly, as pros, as workers, or as a government, as a state, like how do we grow from having just private monopolies? We don't. It stagnates. When there's a monopoly, they have an incentive to just jack the prices up, or if there's a couple other monopolies, they got a cartel going, they do price fixing, they know how to deflate wages. There's a lot of things that monopolies can do to start controlling the company, and that's kind of where we're at now. And Marx's argument was like, again, great opportunity for us to say, hey, thanks for doing all the great work and monopolizing for us. It's time that those resources are now invested in the people. You laid out great groundwork to get things going for us. It's now time for the state to do some central planning and point this country in the right direction because we have a robust industrialized system.
It's been a slow decline ever since then.
Absolutely.
They're
just like trying to figure out how to fucking keep it going. You could probably actually just go to.
It's more like a demo.
Are you at 107? Yeah, you could probably just go to 107.
That's Bidenomics. That seems to be what's happening in the U.S. economy now. The wealthiest 1 to 10% are making so much money that it exceeds the deprivation and the indebtedness and the reduction and shrinkage of the 99% economy. And so probably, the only hope that the United States has
I wonder. Let me finish this sentence.
Of maintaining this kind of prosperity for the wealthiest financial class is to freeze the status quo, to block any kind of active government policies to promote labor and industry at home or abroad.
Yeah.
And the industrial capitalism.
Great point. So, as he mentioned earlier, okay, so when you go and turn on freaking CNN or MSNBC and they're like, the economy is booming. Okay, this is fucking crazy. It's fucking crazy. Okay, our economy is so over financialized that the
people
top
don't understand. Like, we live in a silent depression. I don't know if people are aware that we're talking about.
That's like sort of like true. People are so out of touch.
Like, no, if you do not like you have to show your parents an inflation calculator. They won't get it. They simply just won't.
I showed a friend. I talked a friend out of getting a house the other day because I showed her a mortgage calculator. She's like, absolutely not.
Yeah. Crazy. What we're living on today is like basically like 15K of like what? And we're like what 30% of like what the Great Depression was. Like we're not.
Yeah.
We're
past where the French Revolution was.
We're in a worse spot, like way worse spot now than the Great Depression.
Great Depression, French Revolution, like Roman Empire.
And people just don't get it. They just don't
what's
get
funny,
it.
I want to finish this point really quick. So, listen, this is people. So the fire sector, finance and real estate. Okay, this isn't people working at like a Starbucks and getting a paycheck and then cashing that paycheck at the bank. This is people who trade stocks. This is people who operate on hedge funds. This is people who mess around with different securities, right? I'm not trying to get down, but they turn money into more money, right? That's what a capitalist does. And what he's saying is the top 10%, okay, top 10% of all Americans are responsible for the economy growing. So bottom 90% could be doing dog shit. We're doing terribly. And the economy is doing great because we're so over financialized and there's so many people trading around fake pieces of paper that the economy can look fine on paper. Okay. So next time you hear somebody saying the economy is doing great, just know that it's because 10% of Americans all got together and traded a bunch of pieces of paper.
But it's all fake. The economy is all fake.
I mean, freaking Marx talks about fictitious capital, and there's a whole thing to be said about NFTs, but that's a whole nother day.
Oh my
NFTs, AI art. But I don't know. I think I'll talk about the housing stuff another day, but I think it's like.
Are you gonna do bread and circuses again?
I think so. I just don't know if I'm gonna do more of I'm just debating should I do more of the theory stuff, talk more? Like, I don't know what direction. I'm just like debating on the direction stuff. Should I take the Monday slot?
Well, I don't. We might have to go back to Monday starting.
Oh,
go back
either
to
way. Either way.
back
Either
to
way.
class. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
I'm just trying to figure it out, but yeah, because I got a bunch of stuff, right? I do want to do something. I'm just figuring out what direction I want to go in. I also have to work more. So I'm like, maybe I'll just fucking do like a TikTok with like a DoorDash. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
we'll figure that out. Anyway, to wrap things up for our last segment here. So you might have noticed a lot of different rhetoric going on about cartels and terroristic fentanyl distribution, which is certainly happening and something that's real and going on. However, I want like people to really notice like the language here. Now, United States war with Mexico, is it really that crazy? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I did.
You think they'd start right in their backyard?
I mean, is it really? Look at a map. Hold on, let me pull a map.
Do you think it's more likely than doing like a war in Taiwan?
Well, no, not necessarily. But like, hold on, let's look at a map of Mexico pre-America. Okay. This is how long ago? This is the 1840s.
Yeah, when it was huge. Yeah, it's like half of America.
Like, is it really that crazy to think that we would go back? It's only been like what, like 100 years? You can go back.
I mean, it's kind of crazy to me, but I want to hear where you're going from it.
Well, let's see. We're seeing a lot of hype and rhetoric around this. Bringing troops.
That's definitely true. They're definitely talking a lot.
We want to bring in a special military operation in Mexico. What does that sound like to you? A special military operation? Who else did a special military operation recently?
Yeah.
Because of a crisis that was happening at his border. Who was that?
I know. We're just gonna copy Russia's playbook. Except we haven't been fighting. There's no proxy war going on.
Are we the evil bad guy Putin now? That's what I want to understand. Are we the evil bad guy Putin now? Because we want to.
Are we gonna find out that we've been doing some freaking
at the border?
We're gonna find out we've been doing some freaking like color revolution since 2014 there.
Yeah. But it's like we get anyway. I put this together because like this is just something that's like been catching my eye because
I've been seeing it's all over the news. It's true. They do freaking talk about it a lot.
No, but you see it especially, and when I put this together for a reason, because it's nearly every single Republican candidate, almost all of them, support this idea of bringing troops to Mexico, essentially.
And it's now time for America to wage war on the cartels. In this war, Joe Biden has sided against the United States and with the cartels. They are making more money than they've ever made before.
To take out fentanyl labs, to take out drug cartel operations. Would you support that kind of American military use?
Yes, and I will do it on day one.
I would use the U.S. military, if necessary, to annihilate the Mexican drug cartel.
What have I said I would do? I would use
Yeah,
our
love
own
this
military
idea.
to secure our own southern border. I think that is legally, ethically, and constitutionally justified. That is how we seal the southern border. In fact, I think
I
that's
get
going to
some
be an
weird
approach that
vibes
we'll
from
eventually
Vivek,
need
man.
to seal our own northern border as well.
Which is to use U.S. military force, if necessary, to address the Mexican drug cartels, who, yes, are terrorist organizations.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will unleash our military to crush the cartels and stop these terrorists from killing our kids.
And we can't continue to allow that to happen. When it comes to the cartels, we should treat them like the terrorists that they are. I would send special operations in there and eliminate them just like we eliminated ISIS, and make sure that they know there's no place for them. If Mexico won't deal with it, I'll make sure I deal with it.
Well, you know what you tell the Mexican president? Either you do it or we do it. But we are not going to let all of this lawlessness continue to happen. And we can do that by putting special ops in there, by doing cyber, by really being strategic. Just like we dealt with ISIS, you do the same thing with the cartels.
And so, like, how well did that go when we went to go deal with ISIS? Does anyone remember when we went to ISIS? What when we went to go fight ISIS? What happened after that? When we went to go fight in Afghanistan for 20 years?
Yeah, they ended up staying there. Yeah, or like freaking Al Qaeda.
Did we win? Did the terrorists win it? You tell me, because I mean.
So I mean, Go Start just put something up. The step one thing. That's kind of what I was saying. That's kind of what I was saying to you the kind of other day. But because I'm kind of the belief that like we enable the drug and human trafficking. So how interested are these apparatchiks and really addressing this?
I'm going to make the case for it. I'll make the case. I don't think it's that crazy of an idea. It's not just the current candidates that are running for it. I mean, we've seen Lindsey Graham, who's been practically shouting
crazy.
Lindsey Graham's a maniac, dude. And here's him. He's literally calling.
He's never met a war he doesn't.
He's calling Mexico a narco-terrorist state. It needs to be held accountable. Listen to this.
Commander-in-Chief, but I'd like to give the Commander-in-Chief congressional authorization to use force to stop the poisoning of America. If they don't use it, we'll have an election in 2024, and people can run on a platform. I would use it if I could. So the point I'm trying to make is that the current situation is untenable. The Mexican government is no longer in charge of most of their country. It's a narco-terrorist state, and we should put on the table the tools of our military to go after these terrorists as if they were any other terrorist. And they're killing more Americans from drug cartels in Mexico than all the terrorist activity combined since 9/11.
You and I talked during the raids on ISIS and the beginning of the war on ISIS. They beheaded 6 or 7 Americans, tragically, horrible. And we went after them and took care of business. That's a little different than what we're seeing.
Why are we framing that as like a success story? Did that go well? Did that really go that well that when we went to go fight ISIS?
This is how depraved we are. Like, we have no excuses. So just bomb other.
Are we just pretending that went okay?
Dude, here's my whole thing. My whole thing is that like when you start talking so openly and on public news shows and TV shows about outright war with another country, like just straight up war with another country, that's like a level of insanity that like is just so beyond the pale to me. Because like AMLO's not cool with this. AMLO's like, don't be bringing people to my country.
Oh no, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You know, so like why does the US just get to talk so openly and casually about like waging a fucking thousands of people sending in troops to war in another country that's not theirs? And
no, this is literally a talking point. This is a talking point that people are they're running on this. They're running on going on military operation in Mexico. But just an extra spice. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that she literally wants to bomb Mexico. Listen.
There's so many things that we can stop. Another thing we need to stop is funding the war in Ukraine. Don, I can't understand why we're fighting the war in Ukraine, and we're not bombing the Mexican cartels who are poisoning Americans every single day. And I know that sounds extreme.
They're saying it out loud.
This is embarrassing.
We need to stop funding Ukraine so we can bomb the cartels.
There's so many things that we can stop. Another thing we need to stop
cluster
is
bombs
funding the war
on
in Ukraine. Don, I can't understand why we're fighting a war in Ukraine and we're not bombing the Mexican cartels who are poisoning Americans every single day. And I know that sounds extreme. I'm not talking about the Mexican government or the Mexican people. I'm talking about the cartels. They're murdering.
Oh, just bomb the cartel
in America these days. I mean, when I interviewed Kevin on this podcast, he was talking about.
It's absolutely.
Guys, listen, there's like I haven't gone down the whole rabbit hole, but I know enough that like the US runs on like the drug trade, and I've done a show on bread and circuses where I've like explored the topic of like human trafficking. Like I know I'm pushing back too much. You should just do your story, I'm gonna
show I'll show the video that the guy kind of goes through all of this, but I really want people to pay because the way that we sell wars to the public, you hear a lot of these buzzwords chiming around, right? Like how we need to, just like how we fought ISIS, just like how we went.
Okay, so they're trying to make like a false equivalent.
No, listen, really pay very, very close to the language that these people are using, and tell me if this sounds any familiar to you.
Mexico. Fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction being unleashed on America from your country. It's coming from your country. You're allowing safe havens for these groups to operate with impunity. What you're doing is not working. Your country is being used by narco-terrorists to poison America. We ask you to help us. The best thing can happen is that we work together, but I will tell the president of Mexico that what you're doing is not working.
Yeah, no.
We're going to change the game. We're going to up the ante. To the president of Mexico, fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction.
Listen, dude, what would you think President Biden would say if AMLO was just on Mexican TV and was being like, yo, we need to bomb the shit out of fucking Texas and Florida so like people stop fucking hustling coke and freaking like trading it back and forth? Like what, like the cartels are kind of like a mutual enemy, right? Like the Mexico doesn't really want the cartels either, do they? The cartel to a degree probably like pays off the government a little bit. Like I don't know that much. I assume there's a little bit of corruption there. But like I think that it's my understanding that the cartels kind of have an outsized power against the government at this point.
So I feel like the misunderstanding here, or at least like the case that I'm trying to make, is that I don't think a war or like military action per se against like specific cartels necessarily harms the drug trade. In fact, I think it actually enhances it. And so you see these patterns that
I would agree with that. Okay, that's
so like this. So this happens. So you see this with Afghanistan, and it's funny that they bring up the ISIS thing, because when we went into Afghanistan, opium production increased by like 3,000%, and so we have these patterns with wars, like so war and drug trade and the drug trade sort of like go hands in hand, because once you go in, you demolish a country. The only thing they have left to sell is these poppy seeds for shitty money, and then you're transferring it over to the US. And
your take is actually like more cynical than I thought. Is that like you think that like they'd work something out where they're bombing the country to increase the like?
I don't think it's as convoluted as that, but like I think they understand how
it's not going to be a negligible impact, and they still get to like
this is a repeat of Vietnam, Afghanistan, Laos, and then this is why.
Why would AMLO be cool with Reaper drones being freaking used?
It doesn't matter if AMLO's cool with it or not. If it happens to be a war with Mexico, they said that it's whether you cooperate or not. We're gonna send troops in, and it will force the Mexican military to respond. This is all the way back from the 1940s, 1960s. This is CIA telling you how the drug trade works and how they use drug money to fund the wars. They are using the drug money that they the fentanyl crisis, they're using that as extra. Oh, you think the defense budget, that's the only money that's being used to fund wars and the MI6? Absolutely not. It's human trafficking, it's drug trafficking, it's the black market. Listen.
1972, a U.S. intelligence agent in Southeast Asia sent a secret field report to Customs. It suggested a serious conflict of interest. Quote, "It was ironic that the CIA should be given the responsibility of narcotics intelligence, particularly since they were supporting the prime movers. Even though the CIA was, in fact, facilitating the movement of opiates to the U.S., they steadfastly hid behind the shield of secrecy and said that all was done in the interest of national security." End quote.
Money was always there. We had a program. In fact, that's the reason the agency supply system was so much better than the military supply system.
Cash.
They didn't have to go through a procurement system, a bureaucracy that made everything cost 3 times as much.
How was the war in Laos financed?
U.S. appropriated funds.
Through which agency?
I think through the CIA and through the Defense Department, both.
How much of the money that was going to pay these thousands and thousands of tribesmen?
It reminds me of those pictures you see of all the gold that we stole from freaking Iraq.
Yeah, and so think about it like this. So like when you go to bomb like a cartel, like let's say like we're targeting, I'm not familiar with the different kinds of cartels. There's a video that kind of gets into it. You're empowering all of the rival cartels in the area. It's split by like county. Like they're control. There's the cartels.
They got borders.
The entire they control different regions. So all you're doing is really empowering all the other cartels to come in and swoop in and potentially actually bring in operations in the United States. But listen to this.
Thousands and thousands of tribes.
We're also using the money to fund rival. So like in this case scenario, we would use the money.
The money would also be used to have the rival gangs fucking fight.
Rival gangs to fight the gangs that we're fighting, just like ISIS, just like Al Qaeda. It's a repeat of the same exact thing.
Tribesmen to fight for us, and to pay these thousands and thousands of tribesmen to fight for us, for the CIA. Where was that money coming from?
From the trade.
From the opium trade?
Yes, surely.
How would that work?
Well, money would be paid for the transportation and the safe arrival of the merchandise to its proper destination. And that money would be paid to the carrier, the person transporting the merchandise. And then that money would be used to pay off the farmers. But as I told you, they got so little of it that there was an enormous amount left over. And it was that money that was used to feed to the peasants in order to get them to continue not only fighting for us, but also continuing to give us very important intelligence about the movement of the North Vietnamese.
The Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia grew directly out of our covert policies there. Before it had been run by French intelligence with the Corsican Mafia. We took over with our Air America and civil air transport planes flying in arms to our allies, flying back out with the heroin. The first target being U.S. GIs during the Vietnam War, the second target being the United States itself.
We're funneling the drugs back to the United States on purpose.
Did you ever read the article by Gary Webb about Iran-Contra being funded through Nicaraguan coke?
Yeah.
So it's
all
like
the same repeat.
Yeah, it's all the same. It's all the same stuff. So I'll concede there. Do you see
the angle that I'm coming at here?
Yes. The part that I can't wrap my head around is like, I don't care what country you are. If you're bringing drones into like my country, and I know that you had a president like Obama who fucking 9 out of 10 people he fucking killed with a drone was a civilian, I'm hitting up Russia and China.
Oh yeah.
So that's
he's already buddy. They already don't like him because he doesn't like Israel. He supports the.
It's just like they're like, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna kill him?
They don't like him. They do not like him. Or whatever relations they have, whatever friendly relations they currently have.
I'm also cynical enough to believe that they would even just say that there needs to be a war in Mexico with the cartels, just to help the defense stocks, just so they think that we have like some forever war at our borders. Oh, well, we can always freaking have like drones and freaking Reapers and freaking shit hovering around in freaking Mexico, so we can always count on for the next 20 or 30 years, you know, those freaking things being used. So I could see them doing something like that. I don't know. I will be beside myself the day that we just have troops in Humvees just go across the border and just go into Mexico. I just and I saw that other video you sent me with the guy saying that it should just be totally air superiority. But
yeah, watch this. Will the U.S. actually declare war on Mexico? Let's see how.
Because for years, Mexico's troubles have spilled over across the border into the United States. Over 15 million illegal immigrants are currently residing within the country, with an estimated hundreds, if not thousands, more entering the country nearly every day. The vast majority of whom enter through the Mexican-American border, and a good number of which aren't even citizens of Mexico, but merely taking advantage of the country's lacking regulations and security to enter the United States. This has left many with concerns about precisely who is entering the country, especially if such individuals have links to major terrorist groups from overseas. Of the new arrivals, many of those migrants who are citizens of Mexico are motivated to flee by the very conditions created by the cartels, creating a vicious cycle which sees Mexico's problems go unsolved and slowly brings those same troubles to the United States. These illegal immigrants strain the American job market, discouraging businesses from raising wages for American workers when illegal workers will do the same jobs for less than minimum wage, further leaving fewer job opportunities for American citizens. Hundreds and even thousands of metric tons of drugs are smuggled across the border both by the cartels and by individuals, with these same drugs contributing to some 100,000 overdose deaths among Americans every year, over twice as many deaths as caused by guns in the same period. This is not even taking into account that the southern border has become a hotbed for human trafficking, so much so that it is estimated to be a multi-billion-dollar industry for these modern-day slavers. Beyond this, some of the same violence and gang activity which has plagued Mexico has now begun emerging in the United States. The United States has even seen the growth of the domestic Mexican mafia, a group which originated in the United States and which is regarded to be just as powerful and as dangerous as any of Mexico's largest cartels. For these reasons, as well as on account of a slow and half-hearted effort at securing the border by both countries, not just one but several American politicians, particularly on the side of the Republican Party, have begun demanding that if Mexico continues to demonstrate an inability to stabilize itself, that the United States will use its own military force to stabilize the country. The politician receiving perhaps most scrutiny for this proposal is presidential hopeful.
I'm sorry. That's like, it's a good video, but it just made me think about something. It's like, it's another thing about like kind of what I was talking about earlier with capitalism is that like these politicians know that their donor class needs cheap labor. They know that they have to keep searching for cheap labor. Where does that cheap labor come from? As you just showed in this video, human trafficking. So like why are they like playing both sides, you know?
Because it enhances.
You think it actually boosts it? You think it
boosts it more? Yeah. When you if you imagine a war-torn country, you don't think that human trafficking is going to boost exponentially? So
they gotta kill AMLO.
If you devastate the,
they gotta get a puppet in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all. And let me ask you, like, so do you think that these politicians are coming up with this by themselves?
No,
they have to be fed this by someone.
100%. They all have the same, like you.
They have to be fed the line. You know,
it's the same thing with the China. It's the same thing with the China talking points that we see coming from like what Tucker or Alex Jones.
They're fed. It's fed. It's fed by someone higher up.
Vivek Ramaswamy, who called for a special military operation into Mexico for the purpose of eradicating the cartels. But Vivek isn't alone in this position. A total of 4 high-profile Republican presidential candidates in 2024 have made military intervention in Mexico a part of their platform. Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and of course Donald Trump.
Unreal.
Meanwhile, nearly every declared Republican candidate has called for at minimum the classification of the cartels as terrorist groups. In Congress, a wide range of Republicans from Tom Cotton to Dan Crenshaw to Mike Waltz have all vocalized support for military intervention in Mexico, with many others across both parties calling for at minimum a stronger response to such groups. The Democratic position has long aimed to treat the effects of Mexican instability, arguing for pathways to citizenship, providing treatment and care for addiction, sending financial aid to the Mexican government, and creating more opportunities for both citizens and immigrants to discourage criminal activity. However, if the situation worsens, it's quite possible the call for intervention could also emerge on the Democratic side, especially if Mexico continues its flirtation with Russia and China as it has done in recent years, and if it begins adopting more anti-democratic practices, which some American politicians have expressed concern over. Most interesting,
and they support Palestine too.
Interestingly enough, is
anti-Israel.
A seemingly very vocal support for such an intervention by a minority of Mexican Americans. The reasoning appearing to be that they fled Mexico in fear of the government's failure to solve the crisis and genuinely believe that only an American intervention has a chance of solving it and perhaps providing them the opportunity to return home. This is a sentiment not too dissimilar from the number of Chinese Americans who support...
What?
That's crazy. So they think that they genuinely believe that the U.S. has to attack Mexico to like liberate them?
Yeah, to save. They believe that fentanyl is literally a weapon of mass destruction.
American intervention against the People's Republic of China.
Oh, and they think it's Chinese fentanyl labs, yeah.
China for the sake of ending communist rule. American interest in a Mexican intervention is also distinctly different than just about every other major American conflict since the turn of the century, none of which were even based in the Western Hemisphere, let alone right along the American border. While Islamic terrorism had a major effect upon American life, many feel that the issues posed by Mexican instability have continuously affected the day-to-day lives of American citizens nationwide, and have only compounded and grown year by year. The proximity between the United States and Mexico, the degree to which Mexico's issues affect the United States, as well as the history the two countries have shared, allows the typically anti-war, anti-interventionist America First faction of the Republican Party to justify this particular military action as falling within the bounds of domestic American concerns, and within the historic bounds of the Monroe Doctrine. One might say that the politicians arguing on behalf of intervening in Mexico are no different than the politicians who initiated the wars in the Middle East, and that such...
Yeah.
Do you know about the Monroe Doctrine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
okay. So tell our listeners if they don't know what the Monroe Doctrine is.
Well, you explain it. You explain it. Okay. I'm not gonna know them by heart, but
so because basically what the Monroe Doctrine says is that the global South, okay, literally is the U.S. backyard. Okay, the U.S. literally feels like that if they want to just fuck around in another country that's poorer than them, that they can just bomb the shit out of it, or they can colonize it, they can do whatever they want. That's the Monroe Doctrine. They believe that any country that's poor is like their domain. That's why you have what was the base?
And this
was like a Russian base in Cuba.
Well, it goes all the way back with like the Louisiana Purchase and Polker. Some other president came in at some point, but they tried to buy a lot of Mexico at first.
I believe it.
I showed the map at the beginning, but
yeah, it was a huge bit.
This is what they're running on.
Politicians are hypocrites for calling themselves America First or criticizing the neoconservatives. However, it must be stressed that the motivations are certainly coming from different places. Middle Eastern wars were far off policing actions on behalf of the United States protecting its global democratic world order. The actions of and within these countries had little to no impact on the American conscience. Whereas what goes on in Mexico does have a direct impact upon American lives, and from the perspectives of the politicians now advocating these policies, they believe that resolving the problems that Mexico is facing will prevent the spread of and even stop those same problems in the United States. Mexican President Obrador has taken these threats seriously and has assumed...
So I'm just like, I'm a little brain damaged, so I gotta like say these things as I think about them, but like just to kind of tie things together, do we kind of see how these threats could be like kind of like an imperialist thing? That this is actually a form of imperialism, us sending troops. And if what you say is accurate, which I could actually see, that like us creating a refugee crisis in Mexico, and us creating a freaking cartel wars, infighting within Mexico, could create a refugee crisis and actually increase human trafficking, then it stands to reason that what is actually happening here is a form of imperialism. And, you know, again, it's the capitalists, might have something to do with it, deflating prices and trying to make it harder for Americans to live, and that there's an actual desire for illegal labor.
Well, like that's why I'm saying, like when we're making this argument, I think we have to understand that the CIA is probably already 10 steps ahead.
That's kind of what I'm laughing about.
We're already talking
the CIA is already in every single one of those.
Exactly. So like if we're sitting here and we're trying to like analyze a plan that's that's coming forth, or whatever like U.S. imperial policy is coming next on the table, you sort of like to understand it from the point that like.
It's interesting. It's real cynical to think that like we're basically doing it for drugs and human labor power.
Well, but like there's like an evolution of like understanding like our imperial power. I feel like even after World War II, like we sort of felt like the big bosses. Like, that's like where we wanted to go into Vietnam and like show off our guts or whatever. And so the blowback from that.
Yeah, like what would be the blowback from this? Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
It almost doesn't matter because the chaos is part of it. At what point does it become like ignoring and then transforms into like a willful intention? Because we see what happens in Vietnam, and then we go like we're in Vietnam and we're in Afghanistan, and we're shipping the poppy, like the opium, back to the U.S. Why else would we be doing that if it wasn't to drug at our entire population?
Right.
If it wasn't for things like Iran-Contra, what would be the point other than to purposely drug the entire population and make them like dumb, like
and fund more wars?
Yeah, and it ultimately it's a
damn.
It's benefiting all around. It's all chaos, and it's not like we're any new to destabilizing the global South, and we see the results of that, and we understand what happens. We see how the drug trade comes through. It's nothing new. I don't see anything new happening.
The position that Mexico's affairs are none of the U.S.'s concern, that the issues facing the U.S. are not at all Mexico's fault or responsibility, and that any continued discussion of military intervention will be met with an information campaign by Mexico to encourage its diaspora living within the U.S. to politically boycott.
I don't know what Amo's plans are at all.
He's gonna get suicided, dude. If they really want, you can't just drone strike another country and be like, hey, either get with it or get over it.
Anyway, I thought, man, like whatever the plan is, like I feel like this was like a good analysis of like what the plan actually was. So, like this is like not this video specifically, but like that showing like where
this guy did,
or at least like where the intention is. But like if you're curious as to like how exactly this would play out.
He gave the analysis like so I was watching. There's this other guy like Brian Burlitek does on his like Ukraine analysis.
Yeah, no, I love all of these like geographic like war graphic channels that like kind of show. Yeah, but this is like this really shows
against the cartels dates back a couple of years, but really took root when members of the Small Scorpions cartel fired at an American white minivan they mistook for rivals. In the end, 2 out of 4 Americans in that vehicle lost their lives. The Wall Street Journal wrote, Republicans' new border plan: send military into Mexico. That's because Representatives Dan Crenshaw and Mike Waltz introduced a new bill. This is the official document from the United States Congress. The word cartel was mentioned 21 times and would legitimize the use of U.S. military assets against the cartels right into Mexico. And the most shocking about all this is that according to the Washington Post, declaring war on Mexican cartels is popular. They're citing a poll where 55% of all voters and 86% of Republicans would be in favor of deploying the U.S. military across the border.
We're fucked. We're absolutely fucked.
People are so bloodthirsty, man.
This country, if there's anyone that deserves to get nuked, it's us. I'm willing to say that.
Only ones who have used nukes.
In Mexico. Meanwhile, Senator Graham also introduced the Ending the Narcos Act of 2023 that aims to label cartels as TRST groups. Now, the main reason often brought up for this military intervention, the casus belli, is that Mexican-produced fentanyl is thought to cause the death of between 80,000 and 100,000 Americans a year. Then there's an increasing number of bolder and bolder cartel incursions into U.S. territory. On the 8th of August, a group of cartel gunmen armed with rifles and body armor were seen on cameras crossing illegally into Texas, near the city of Fronton. As a matter of fact, it was reported that these armed members of the cartels are the ones escorting the migrants across the border. It's been a known fact for a while, but now we have visual evidence. The New York Times now claims that the cartel...
It's a network. It's a controlling...
Yeah, I mean, like, that's not...
It's not just about the fentanyl. It's the drug.
The human trafficking.
It's human trafficking. It's war. It's weapons.
Does he give the number on the human trafficking? Because we talked about it. It's like almost a million people they bring over the border a year.
It's $1 billion business. Listen to this.
Cartels are the ones smuggling migrants across the US-Mexico border. They write that this is now an industry worth billions of dollars. Cartels have increased their involvement in migrant smuggling over the past decade, transforming the operation into a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And if migrants are expelled from the US back towards Mexico, they're immediately caught by the awaiting cartels and are sometimes back on the way towards the US border in a matter of hours. NBC News reported that in the fiscal year of 2022, there were 2.76 million entries of migrants into the US through the Mexican border. Cartels even organize a journey of the migrants up to the border with planes and buses for a sum of roughly $10,000 per person. And lastly, in the past 20 years, Mexican cartels have also massively expanded throughout the United States. And in this one, a 2020 map from the DEA showing what cities are under control of various Mexican cartels in the United States.
So we understand that this is all intentional. We understand that the CIA funds these people.
Yeah, this is like kind of like some propaganda.
This is the intentional purpose of trying to drug America, because why? Fentanyl turns everyone into mindless zombies, and what is the the American dream really of the elites is to turn everyone into a quasi-retarded population where no one asks any questions and everyone just goes along with whatever.
Yeah, but doesn't fluoride just straight up, or not fluoride, fentanyl just straight up kill people?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's terrible. It's horrible. It's
just believe that.
Like tearing like absolute like not even Rust Belt anymore. Like white suburban families is getting completely destroyed by this shit. It's way worse than you think.
That they now maintain a presence in over 1,000 cities. And this is
I'm surprised you don't know anyone who died from fentanyl. I know I can name like
I know people. I had a friend who OD'd on Oxycontin.
Yeah, Oxycontin's a bad one too. No, but fentanyl's like especially bad. It's synthetic, and no one.
I had a friend tell me he knew somebody who died from contact, and like I found that hard to believe, but that's like the only time somebody's ever told me. Because you hear those cop stories. Oh, a cop looked at fentanyl funny, and he freaking like needed Narcan. Like that doesn't really happen.
That doesn't happen. Yeah, that doesn't really happen. But
is where many in Washington want to launch their own special military operation. Not a war, just a special military operation. The first thing that is often brought up by politicians to fight the cartels was to carry out missile and drone strikes against their drug labs, as well as on leaders of the major cartels, like the Cartel de Sinaloa, which was founded by El Chapo. The US has all the satellites and aerial reconnaissance tools necessary for such operations. The DEA and US intelligence know Mexico like their backyard. They have many informants, and they know exactly what's going on the ground.
To say like that like we're stepping into like a mindless mistake, or like we don't know like what we're doing by like throwing
we're giving 18-year-olds with
exactly what we're doing.
Bro, we're giving 18-year-olds with Xbox controllers drone reapers to go freaking do recon over the fucking state of Mexico without their president's permission.
Yeah,
that's the level of like depravity we're at.
That's where we're at. And we have them. We have them essentially. We already have Mexico essentially on lockdown. It's just these cartels.
This is crazy.
These cartels not even the government can control. The Mexican government, they've been trying to take care of the cartels for years. They can't do anything. They're essentially their own government at this point.
It's got to be like that. It's got to be so bad where I am.
It is that. No, it literally is that bad. Like the cartels control like regions of Mexico. It's not. It's
from a technical perspective. There's nothing.
This is this is why I wanted to like show like this video, because like this really demonstrates like the. I didn't know a lot about like the cartel like ins and outs and like the different factions and stuff, but like listen.
Stopping the US to carry out such strikes. The US Air Force has 300 to 400 MQ-9 Reapers that can each fire up to 16 AGM 114 Hellfire missiles, equivalent to the payload capacity of an Apache helicopter. The Reaper's long endurance allows it to loiter over a specific area for an extended period. The Reaper's long endurance allows it to loiter over a specific area for an extended period, providing continuous surveillance of potential targets like safe houses and supply routes. The Reaper's advanced sensors, including high-resolution cameras and synthetic aperture radar, enable it to identify and track individuals and vehicles of interest. As you can see, this drone is perfect for missions against cartels in Mexico. The US Air Force could also make use of its F-35. For example, in 2019, the US carried 7,000 airstrikes in Afghanistan. They could unleash the same payload on the cartels. One problem is that from all its air bases, the US Air Force would have trouble engaging targets on the southern part of Mexico, although this could be solved with the support of the US Navy and their aircraft carriers. On top of that, the national interest reported that an upgrade will let Reapers fly out from aircraft carriers. So by positioning one aircraft carrier in the Gulf of Mexico and another along the Pacific coast, would allow a full coverage of Mexican territory. Of course, we could develop the technicalities of US military strike capabilities, but let's talk in a practical way. Reality is, every time a lab would be destroyed, another 5 will pop up. Alright, here's a game. Try to spot the fentanyl lab, alright?
And I also wanted to point out, like, I feel like Americans would feel a lot more comfortable with this war if it was a lot like a, air, like drone war, as opposed to like actually sending troops in there. Can you imagine if like they just happened to like drone bomb Mexico?
Well, but that begs the question, because there's kind of like this, like you cannot.
You don't have to send. You don't have to like send in American men in there.
You can't win a war without boots on the ground. What are you doing?
What do you mean? Obama did a drone. We've been doing drone wars for years.
Right, and we never won them.
Yeah. Watch this.
Take a guess, aim, and shoot! Quickly enough, the cartels will simply relocate their labs into urban areas. Places filled with civilians. For example, malls, hospitals, churches, schools, and then it's checkmate. The US Air Force can't do anything. The other option would be to simultaneously carry out strikes against cartel leadership, like what was done against various TRST organizations across the Middle East. Thing is, if you strike one cartel leader, eventually you'll have 5 new targets. How about I pull out my massive map that I showed you last time? The once powerful Gulf cartel has fractured in Mexico's northern state of Tamaulipas, with different splinter groups jockeying for position in key cities. The more splinter groups, the more violence, the more chaos, the more civilian casualties. So if the generals of the US military think they can achieve success just by using aerial means, then in that case, they have learned nothing from the past 25 years.
Do you understand? Like, do you see like where I'm coming from here? Like how like this is a purposeful disaster. It is an absolute American dream.
But that's what I mean. Like
be able to destabilize Mexico and have.
So Mexico City is what, 13, 14 million people? Okay, maybe more than that. How do you think the Mexican people are going to feel when they know that the
government would have to respond? They would have to respond to that. Well, I mean,
you think it's just like a couple. You just think it's a couple like terminally online Americans that know that freaking Obama had a drone strike program that killed 90% civilians. Wouldn't that scare the shit out of you if a fucking drone was just patrolling over your city?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd scare the shit out of you, and you're an American. Like, so I can't imagine the freaking blowback that will come. Like, maybe you're right. Maybe those crazy motherfuckers will fucking do something like this. But like, the blowback is going to be so bad.
I'm not saying this is coming like anytime like in the near future. I think it's something that we can reasonably expect. Just like Taiwan and China, this is connected.
Well, that's like I was saying, man. On any given scale with America, they're going to go to war because we're out of options. We don't have the petrodollar, which was a source of imperialism. Losing the petrodollar.
We're flailing your arms.
And we don't have, and we're losing dollar. We're losing dollar. The dollar having hegemonic quality to it. So what do? They just have war. Okay, well, if like our dollar doesn't have any value, then we'll back up our value of our dollar by putting a gun to your head.
The neocon game plan, well, maybe not necessarily this, but like whatever this like interventionist or anti-interventionist like Trump or faction is like saying, they fully believe that Ukraine is not worth it. It's not worth the tax dollars.
True.
Because we could be funding wars that are to our benefit. They believe that there are wars.
I know. That's the crazy thing. That's the crazy thing.
And those wars take place in China, and they take place in Mexico, and they're connected because they believe that there's Chinese labs in Mexico that are creating the fentanyl. So,
and there was
not true. There's validity.
To tie it back again before we continue, there was a salient point that they made. I don't know if we skipped past it or not, but one of the issues with imperialism is that by having a country that is so antagonizing and always threatening war to other countries forces other countries to invest more in their defense instead of their development. So by being antagonizing, we actually slow the growth of the world and slow the growth of these countries that we antagonize. We can continue.
But you're also like you're enhancing the black market. Do you see it?
Yeah, absolutely enhancing the black market.
Do you see like how I showed it before? Like
100%, 100%.
You're making all of these rival gangs. You're actually making the drug trade worse.
This is the wet dream of American warfare. Destroy the enemy solely using the Air Force. They didn't work during the Vietnam War and still doesn't work today. What you have to know is that the Sinaloa cartel is considered to be the wealthiest, most stable, and decentralized organization. They can survive the loss of key leadership figures, but not necessarily the others. So chances are this US missile strike campaign might actually strengthen the Sinaloa cartel by getting rid of all their rivals. The US will necessarily need boots on the ground. Now another talking point about these politicians would be to send in these special forces. Seems like they watch too many Hollywood movies and end up believing their own propaganda. Now let's say the US decides to unleash on the Sinaloa cartel. We're talking airstrikes, drone strikes, spec ops. US intelligence could even cooperate with rival cartels and use their informants to destroy the Sinaloa cartel. Now, once the Sinaloa cartel has been seriously crippled, who do you think will fill the void? The rivals of the Sinaloa cartel, like the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, which is already a growing military powerhouse in Mexico. So unless they ally with a cartel to fight off the other ones, which, by the way, politically speaking, is not possible, the US military would have to engage all the cartels simultaneously, and it will be total chaos in Mexico. It's almost mission impossible, and the sharp increase in violence which will result from this chaos will push the Mexican government to react. How long is Mexico going to tolerate these aerial incursions into its territory? The next option would be a full-on special military operation. To fully cripple cartel endeavors, the US will need to take physical control of all ports of entry of narcotics into Mexico, especially Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas, from where fentanyl precursors arrive from China, as well as the main logistic hubs of this trade. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, now famous for his mugshot, said that he could send 250,000 US troops across the border. I mean, maybe this is gonna drive recruitment.
Insane. Absolutely crazy.
That's twice as many as Ukraine.
This is
retarded numbers.
That's the anti-war option that you have. The anti-intervention just option is 250,000 troops at the border. Absolutely crazy wet dream. And like to counterpoint with the understand, of course AMLO would freak out. President definitely would not have this.
Well, that's the thing.
But let me ask you: do you really think that the Mexican army has any chance against the U.S. military?
The Mexican military?
Yeah.
Well, that's not really the point that I'm getting at. It's like the kind of where I see it is like if the U.S. isn't trying to take land. They're not trying to colonize. Like, what are they doing with 250,000 troops? They're just trying to perpetuate war. They're just trying to create another forever war. And that's why I think AMLO's like
destabilize Mexico. Yes,
and that's why I think AMLO's like fuck that. And
of course, yeah. So what can you possibly do if you're Mexico in that situation? You would have to call in Russia and China.
You'd hit up. Call. That's what I'm saying. Like this is like.
So would you say this is like a world war kind of conflict?
I could see this freaking turning into a freaking Taiwan situation where it's like you keep freaking like poking the bear, and then eventually people are like, "Yo, what the fuck?" And now it's a freaking war between 4 countries.
Like I can't imagine. So I simply just can't imagine just one war between Mexico and America, and that's it. And who do you think wins in that outcome? Do you think?
Dude, there's no way the U.S. is all by itself.
If
The
you
U.S.
just Mexico and the U.S., who do you think stands out from that?
The Mexico's hitting up China and Russia, and it's over.
No, I'm saying without Russia, without China. Let's say it's a one-on-one U.S. military.
I don't know. I think that's like. I don't want to make that hypothetical.
U.S. military. How much?
When was the last time the U.S. won a war?
How much money do we fund our defense, and how much money does Mexico fund their defense?
Well, right, but how much of their defense is actually
how many of our military bases are in Mexico?
How much of their actual defense is the cartels?
They can't control the cartels.
Yeah, but the cartels aren't going to let Mexico go to the Americans. They're going to fight. You know, the Zapatistas live in freaking southern Mexico. The Zapatistas aren't part of Mexico, but they're going to be like, get the fuck out of here, Americans.
We operate in America, too.
Huh?
They operate in America, too.
The cartels, right. And, like, I saw that graph, and, like, I would want to see a little bit more information on that, on what they mean by
this is still speculation. This is just an analysis. I mean, I don't know.
Rates up, because right now a lot of people in the US Army would not be thrilled with this. Oh my god, what? You mean I actually have to go to war? Shooting guns make my ears ring, and it's gonna scrape off my nail polish. No, let's talk numbers. An expeditionary force of 250,000 would be 33%.
I feel like we would be doing like TikTok dances at the border. You're like, yeah, we're going
at the freaking huge fences. Like
it's gonna be like a TikTok video of like
this is so sad.
We're gonna go fight the
freaking
cartel.
American e-girls freaking doing freaking dances.
You know, like the IDF has e-girls.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
More than the total number of troops present during the surge in Iraq in 2007. At least it's next door. So from a logistics perspective, it shouldn't be that complicated. I'm just thinking, if 170,000 coalition troops had trouble maintaining order in Iraq, what is it going to be like in Mexico, a country with 3 times more inhabitants?
We're still trying to fund a forever war, and we're out of weapons to do it. We're already tanked with Ukraine. We're already out.
Yeah.
So okay, so here's the thing. We're out of weapons. Like, we're pretty much all of the like HIMARS rockets and the freaking artillery is accounted for Ukraine for like the next. It's accounted for, okay? F-16s accounted for. They're being sold to Ukraine, okay? Zelensky is buying that shit on credit, right? Ukraine's going to have a freaking odious debt by the time this is all over. Remember, we're talking about imperialism, IMF. Ukraine has like its worst years ahead of it.
Oh, it's done.
But
it's not even going to be a
country. But who's paying for Mexico's war? Who's paying for us to send freaking F-35s and freaking rockets to cartels in Mexico? Who's paying for that? We gonna bill AMLO? No. Like, it just seems it's like this it really is like that neocon freaking wet dream. It just seems like absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, maybe in like if everything went perfectly and they like all their Raytheon buddies were like, hey, I just happen to have 10,000 freaking artillery rounds sitting in my garage. Let's go take over a country.
Do you know about the history of Mexico? Do you know about like you know we wanted to take all of it, right? You know, it was like a compromise to not take all of it.
It doesn't surprise me. I don't remember the story.
No, that was like part of the compromise. So like there was actually a really big argument. Maybe I'll play that video. There was actually like a really big argument like that, like over like whether or not to take over like Mexico completely. Some of it was like due to like the slave trade. Hold on.
And that is 4.5 times bigger than Iraq. Using the same ratio as in Iraq, the US military would need to deploy 765,000 troops to fully cover Mexico, and they would face hundreds of well-equipped formations of guerrillas that are now becoming expert in the use of IEDs and grenade-dropping drones.
Cartel-operated drones dropped 33 bombs.
We also have to factor in geography. Mexico is a highly mountainous country coupled with lots of major urban areas. The metropolitan area of Mexico City alone has over 20 million inhabitants. But I'm sure a couple Navy SEAL teams and Batman together could make the streets of Mexico City safe. The special military operation in Mexico, the SMOM, would be like the fusion of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, while cranking up the difficulty by 4 levels. That alone presents it as such a bad idea. It reminds me so much of what the US government expected with the Pancho Villa expedition, and most likely it's gonna end the same way, with US forces going home, having failed to capture the guerrilla leaders they wanted. Check out what Mexican newspaper El Economista wrote. It is delusional to think that the North Americans will be able to achieve with an expeditionary force what the Mexican government has not achieved by deploying 600,000 elements in the last 15 years. Okay, bro, I understand. But US military commanders won't change sides for a $10,000 bribe. We know the Mexican army could destroy the cartels tomorrow if they wanted. But the problem is their leaders. There are countless of corruption scandals of high-ranking Mexican military officials in the pockets of various cartels, or how some army commanders sold entire batches of weapons to the cartels. The cartels know that a US military intervention would mean the end of business for them. So we can believe that a lot of money was spent in the recent month in the Mexican media. However, in a way, El Economista has a point. To succeed in this mission, the US military has no other choice but to act with the support of the Mexican army and local security forces, just from a military perspective, to have full physical presence all over the country, and not simply be stranded in bases like in the Middle East, but to actually go out into the country, build numerous checkpoints, search for narcotic shipments in ports and warehouses, patrol both cities and the countryside at all times, and still retain enough forces to chase down cartel gunmen in La Sierra. The White House will need the cooperation of the Mexican government, which they absolutely don't. Mexican President Obrador has rejected calls for the United States military to intervene.
We are not going to permit any foreign government to intervene in our territory, much less that a foreign government's armed forces intervene.
I mean, in that case, Mexico would suffer from an illegal and unprovoked invasion. And now many American politicians say that the Mexican government...
Illegal, unprovoked invasion.
Invasion. Yeah, an invasion.
Is working hand in hand with the cartels to prevent such a special military operation. But what they seem to forget is that in Mexico, the sight of United States Army columns marching into their country is a taboo topic. There is still a lot of resentment among the Mexican population about the loss of Texas, the follow-up Mexican-American War, when American troops ended up storming the capital, Mexico City, and annexed 55% of Mexico's landmass. And a couple decades later, in 1914, when the US occupied the port town of Veracruz, followed by the Pancho Villa expedition of 1916. So like they did in the past, the White House could push for a military intervention.
So, like, this is the video I want to show. So the imperial agenda in terms of Mexico, when it goes back all the way back to 1848, we could have taken all of Mexico. In fact, it's actually the American wet dream to have all Mexico.
Have Mexico.
We would rather have all of Mexico, but watch this.
1848, after defeating Mexico in a war, the United States annexed these territories from it, and there were many notable individuals in the US that weren't happy at simply taking these lands. In fact, they wanted to manifest destiny the entirety of Mexico. Of course, they never did, but given how thoroughly the US won the war, this does raise a question. Why didn't the US take all of Mexico? So the war started after the US annexed Texas, and the new borders between the United States and Mexico became unclear. The Texans, and thus now the Americans, claimed the border to be here, whereas the Mexicans said it was here. Both sent troops, and after a small skirmish, the US declared war. The Americans won the war handily, and so when it was time to make peace, President James K. Polk had a dilemma. Just how much land should they take? Polk had been elected on a promise to expand the United States territorially. The war with Mexico had been contentious domestically, and there were several areas of disagreement. The first was slavery. Mexico had abolished slavery over a decade before the war, but if territory was taken from it, then its status as either a slave state or a free state wouldn't be clear. Those in the South wanted a place for the practice to expand to, and if all of Mexico could be turned into slave states, then its future would be secure. Polk was himself pro-slavery, but given that his party had just lost the midterms and the House was now controlled by the Whig Party, he had to compromise. The second issue was that Mexicans were seen as different. There were many US politicians who worried about a sudden influx of Spanish-speaking non-white Catholics upsetting life there. The third issue was one of practicality. Polk had promised a quick war against an inferior enemy which would give Americans lots of free land. As the war had dragged on and American troops had to move further and further into Mexico, even occupying its capital, this was no longer the case. As such, incorporating all of Mexico would have led to a long and expensive guerrilla war. Those on the opposing side, including future President James, I guess it's okay if you secede Buchanan, wanted all of Mexico. Their arguments were that the US could handle any insurgency similarly to how they had handled the Native Americans before this. They also argued that all of Mexico should be annexed on financial grounds. grounds. Mexico's northern territories were somewhat barren, whereas the south was much more arable and would allow the US Navy access to southern ports, further expanding its reach. It was also believed that annexing all of Mexico would make up for the cost of the war. So why did the lesser annexation plans win out? Well, it was mostly down to a man called Nicholas Trist. Trist was sent to negotiate a peace settlement, and Polk had ordered him to obtain these territories. Trist was largely seen as being too pro-Mexican by the army, and so Polk fired him. The problem was that Trist simply ignored him, and then negotiated a lesser settlement anyway. He did this because he opposed the war and didn't believe that America could be both a republic and an empire. He presented this lesser treaty to an unhappy president who just wanted everything over with at this point. Polk had hoped that this lesser treaty would be signed off by a hostile house. This worked, and despite most Americans actually wanting more of, but not all of Mexico, America only annexed this. I hope you enjoyed this epised, and a special thanks.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Some anti-war guy was like, fuck this.
Yeah, you could thank that one guy for not literally taking over Mexico, because we would have. We were this close.
Yeah, some guy was
this close. And that's my question to everyone. I mean, like, if we could do this 100 something years ago, what's stopping us from doing it again with an even more powerful military?
Well, because there's no, like he was saying in that video, there's no boots on the ground in that video. Like,
right.
Maybe you think we could overtake Mexico just by like blowing shit up, but you have to actually like annex cities and like do what Russia's doing, send tanks in and like secure places and like,
basically, yeah.
You know, like when he said like 750,000 people to take over Mexico, like this is like an unfathomable number to me. Like they be doing what they're doing. They be doing in what they're doing in Ukraine, just like ripping people off the streets and throwing them in cars.
Yeah, I mean,
our numbers have been like low every year for like years. I think
it seems like this like imperial agenda in particular didn't seem like too worth it for them enough for like them to like take over everything. In this case, I don't know, but. Yeah, that was what we had for tonight. It was a really long show, but I'll timeline it up, and we'll have a good.
That's what's up. Yeah, we covered a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Then I guess I'll cover the housing stuff. If you want to keep it on Monday, I'll cover the housing stuff on Monday because it's just a late night. But I had stuff to go over.
We might be back on Monday, and then you do it on Thursday.
Either way,
yeah. Thanks everyone who did tune in tonight. We do appreciate all the viewership and all the members and everyone who supports us. We do have a Patreon. We have a Substack. You can go follow us on Twitter at GetIndieNews. But ultimately, you know, we all appreciate a like and subscribe, whatever you can do to support the channel, because we are definitely suppressed 100%. So
yeah, appreciate you all. Thanks for tuning in. You guys have a good night, and we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, make sure to check out I think Misty on Saturday, but tomorrow Tara's probably taking a break, and I haven't heard anything from that yet. A little bit of a slow week for Ina this week, but I know Ina News is definitely going to come back. Reef and Colin will be back next week. And
yep, because school just started this week, I think.
Oh yeah, that too. Well, we'll have a Labor Day weekend. I hope everyone enjoys their Labor Day week. Have their Monday off from work. I know I'm going to have my Monday off from work, and I'm going to enjoy it.
Just get super fucking high.
Yeah. Go barbecue, go grill a burger, and watch the world burn. Have a good night.